This episode is sponsored by 1Password. When you're trying to grow your business, you need security that can keep up. And 1Password's award-winning password manager is trusted by millions of users and over 100,000 businesses. They help create strong, unique passwords for all your different accounts, so you don't have to rely on memorization or Post-it notes. And 1Password makes private and user-friendly password management easy for everyone, with seamless switching between devices and features like autofill for quick sign-in. To get a free 2-week trial for your growing business, go to 1password.com/commandzone.
Greetings, humans. You have entered the Command Zone, your destination for all aspects of Elder Dragon Highlander. Enjoy your stay.
How's it, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of the Command Zone podcast. I am here with some very old friends of mine. Well, let's let you introduce yourself. This is Greg.
I'm Greg. I've known Josh since maybe 4th grade, and now I'm a physician in Oregon.
And this is Ty.
Hey, I'm Ty Erskine. I've known Josh since elementary school, and I'm a marketing producer.
Yeah, Universal.
That's right.
You're an exec.
I am not here in official capacity.
The reason they are here, though, good segue, is because they are very old school Magic players. In fact, Greg taught me how to play Magic back in 1993, and they haven't really played in like over 20 years or so. So we're going to talk about what Magic was like back in the day. They're the OGs. But before we get into it, of course, we've got to talk about our sponsors. If you want to get your hands on any OG Magic cards, go to cardkingdom.com/command. It's the best place to go to get your Magic products, singles, anything at all. Card Kingdom's awesome because they have a huge inventory, and that means when you add all of your cards for that new deck into a cart and you hit checkout, it all arrives on your doorstep in one convenient package. You're not waiting for a bunch of individual envelopes from different places to arrive. So you get all that stuff all at once, you sleeve it up, and you're ready to go. Again, cardkingdom.com/commands. And then once you get those cards, you want to protect them. The game accessories brand that we trust our own collections to here at the Command Zone is ULTRAPRO. If you go to ultrapro.com/command, you can find all kinds of cool products like sleeves, deck boxes, dice, playmats, wall scrolls, anything you need to make your game room or your battlefield look awesome, and also to protect all of your game pieces. I personally like the Apex sleeves. If you haven't tried these out, they have the best shuffle feel in the business. They protect your cards. They're very, very durable. And also they have cool printed backgrounds. So if you want Duskmourn or Bloomborough or something on the back of your sleeves, ULTRAPRO's got them. All right, ultrapro.com/command. And of course, the final way to support all of our content is directly if you go to patreon.com/commandzone. You can have access to all kinds of cool content earlier than everybody else, extra turns and game nights. Our patrons get to see it ad-free and a day early. And also we release exclusive content like Turn Talk, which is a cool exclusive series we do after every episode of Extra Turns. So right now, I think there's like 20 episodes on a backlog. So if you sign up for our Patreon, you'll get access to all that stuff right away, a whole bunch of content. And you'll also be supporting our channel and all the content that you enjoy. We really appreciate everybody that joins our community. So again, patreon.com/commandzone. Okay, I'm not used to doing that by myself. Usually there's other hosts here doing some of it. Guys, thanks for coming, first of all.
Happy to be here, Josh.
Very old friends. I was thinking about it, and both of you sort of sit at like the epicenter of, for me, filmmaking and Magic, because we played back in high school, back in the very early days. And as we haven't hung out a lot in the last decade or so, but as we've sort of, reestablished old connections, talking about Magic, I was like, I think this is something that our audience might enjoy hearing about it, just like what Magic was like back in the day. And I also think it's kind of fascinating, like how much of that sort of has stuck with you over all this time. Obviously, I've been immersed in it for the last 10 years, but you guys still remember a lot of specifics about those days, which I thought was kind of fascinating, even though, a relatively short amount of time. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to start off with, when's the last time you really played Magic? Ty, do you want to...
Sure, yeah. Well, I played Arena maybe like 2 years ago, and for like one cycle.
Yeah.
And as soon as the new cards came out, I was like, I can't.
Do you remember any of the cards that you were playing with in Arena?
I remember had an Obosh deck.
Okay.
The black and red spider.
Odd CMC matters, or odd casting cost or whatever.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And then if you make it work, she does double damage.
Yeah.
That was the one.
And you played for about how long then?
Maybe like a month or two. Okay. And I really enjoyed it, and I read a bunch of stuff, and then I just couldn't keep up.
It moves fast these days. Before that, so you played for a month or so. Before that, when the last time you'd really played?
Man, it must have been in college. Probably just like Greg playing with you or
So like late 90s.
yeah, definitely.
That might be when I played last. Like I remember like the tournament, Josh's Stormbreaker deck or something. That might have been like it. I mean, I got on Arena a little bit, but I had the box. I got it back from my family or my brother who has it, and had a friend, a colleague at work whose kid played. So I pulled out the box and looked at my old rubber banded decks and said, "You go for it." And got it back all separated. And so I looked at the cards for a little bit, but
When was that?
played. That would have been like 2011 or 12.
So still
But
a long
looking at
time
the
ago, before
cards,
we had
yeah.
even started the Command Zone at that point.
Yeah.
So it's been a long time. And Ty, you played a little bit. So that's
Very little,
interesting.
yeah.
Well, let me ask you, what do you remember about just the game in general from the old days, like in the high school, the 90s days when we started?
When I first started, I didn't know, we opened the packs, didn't have anyone to teach us. We were trying to figure out what was what and how the turns worked. I remember getting like a great worm or something. I forget what the
Craw worm?
A craw worm. Hey, 6/6. I'm going to make a monster animal deck, and just trying to figure it out and working through. I think we played pretty quickly early on, like we were discovering it together. Just how the flow worked without having seen. There was no media for us to learn from. So
Yeah, I didn't learn with you. You taught me. So you had already learned, I don't know who with, your brother maybe?
it must have been my brother.
He said Crawworm was a 6/6. Ty, do you know if that's correct?
That is incorrect. 6'4", I believe.
Yeah, good memory.
Yeah, mark it down. Mark it
I
down.
saw you like twitch a little when you said 6/6.
Okay, wait. I got a force of nature.
All right.
Yeah, do you remember what
It
size
was
that was?
yellow and greenish glowing coming out of the swamp. It was power and toughness equal to your forests.
No, that's a different card.
No. 8/8?
Yep,
8/8
it's an
trample?
8/8
I
trample.
remember
Like,
now.
you got
I
it,
remember
8/8
now.
trample.
Yeah.
That was
yeah.
it. Didn't. Okay, it was 8/8.
Yeah.
I thought it was 4 green.
Guy's
four
Leash
blue.
was the power and toughness equal to your.
Okay. See, my brain's
No,
mixing
it's
it all up.
working. It's
coming
working.
back.
What do you remember from the early days, Ty?
Well, I started in a different playgroup
Yep.
from you guys. And so geographically, we were 10 minutes away or so. So we just, again, we picked it up from scratch. We got starter decks. We had the little white instruction booklet that we just read and started to put it together. And I remember, I don't know, just really being enamored with the game design and how cool it was to get the mana from land. I thought that was just, I just thought the writing of it, the lore of it was really interesting, drew me in.
So both of you remember starting with people that all of you were learning. It's not like, because I had you to teach me a little bit, Greg.
Right.
So that's really interesting because back then you'd get those little rule booklets with the starter decks. But I remember those rules were not very comprehensive. And a lot of the rules weren't even totally spelled out. And I think even one of the rule books said something along the lines like, hey, if you come to a point where you don't know what the rule is, whatever you decide is okay as long as you're consistent.
Right.
Like
Right.
it sort of literally said like, hey, make up your own rule. Just whatever you decide it is, just make sure you continue to do that. Like everybody in your playgroup follows the same rules kind of.
Yeah.
Do you remember how many? Yeah, I guess we didn't say. You eventually played Magic with us, Ty, but at the very start, there was at our high school, there was at least 2 separate playgroups that we ended up knowing about. Well, there was a third one too.
Yeah.
How many people did you start with, Ty? Was it just you and one other?
We had about 3 or 4, I want to say, and we would play 2-on-2.
Do you remember where you got the cards?
No, I don't.
Do you remember, Greg?
No.
Because they were kind of hard to get back then.
I remember
Yeah.
later on going to a card shop like, miles away, like Oregon City or whatever, miles away from where we grew up.
Yeah, Oregon City. I
that
remember getting.
we would get cards or
Which was
trade
15.
for.
We all come from Canby, Oregon, and Oregon City was like a 15-minute drive away.
Yeah.
Which when you're 13 or 14 is far.
You need to have
You can't ride your bike there.
Someone that could drive you there. Yeah.
Geography was a big barrier for my Magic career, I think, because there just was no card shop that I could bike to.
Yeah.
like you guys had.
Yeah. I think you could buy the packs, so it might have even been at the grocery store, was it?
Yeah, because eventually we got a card shop in Canby that
Yeah.
did carry
Oh,
cards.
right. That was later.
Yeah, but at
Yeah.
first it didn't.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you have something to do with that? Did you bring in?
I might have, because I did know both the card shop owners, because I was into sports cards
not be
before that. Yeah, so I might have influenced them to finally get Magic cards by just saying, hey, do you guys have Magic cards every day?
Yeah.
I might have done it.
Yeah, it's possible that I had some of, I don't know for sure. So early days, you're learning the game. There's no internet. So there's no place to really go to find out like how it all works. So it's kind of amazing that you learn to play because
There was a lot of arguments we had around
Yeah,
rules
that-
too. I remember Josh and I always like, no, but this means this. And Josh would
Yeah.
kind of with, no, this is this. I'm like, it doesn't say it that way. That's how you're interpreting it. It is supposed to be this. And like, it was never clear. And we didn't come to blows, but we would fight about rules.
Yeah. And it's interesting because these days you could always just pull out your phone, Google it.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've talked about this where it's like, you know how you'll be like, who's that actor in that one show? And like now you just go IMDb, find it out what it is. But back in the early mid 90s, you would just sometimes have to end the conversation with, we don't know. We'll never, there's no way for us to find this out right now. So with Magic rules, that seems really daunting. Do you guys remember any specific rules or things that like you either got wrong or didn't understand or argue about or found out like how it worked and were like, oh.
I'm not sure if this is specific, but the cascade of instants and interrupts and how those unfolded.
That's exactly
in
what
general.
I was going to say. Yeah.
And you know, like tapping a Tim, and then like, nope, before you do that, I'm going to do this interrupt, in which you could do first, in what order. Like those were the those were the main.
I believe back
hang-ups.
then it was called something else, or maybe they didn't even have a term for it. But now we call it the stack. And the way that it works is that the last in is the first out of anything that's instant speed. They got rid of interrupts. Because even back in the day,
interrupts don't exist?
Yeah, interrupts don't exist. Because even back in the day, interrupts didn't intrinsically work that different than instants. So now how it works, and I believe it did work this way back then, but they didn't have it codified in the same way, which is like you do something like Tim, tap it, that damage doesn't happen, just the ability goes on the stack. So it's going to happen. It's pending. But if anything goes on the stack as pending, everybody else has a chance. Do you want to do anything before that happens? As long as it's an instant speed thing, you can't like cast a sorcery at that time. So you go, I would like to lightning bolt the Tim. Okay, cool. The lightning bolt goes on top of the stack above Tim's ability. Does anybody want to respond to the lightning bolt? Somebody goes, yeah, I'd like to, something else. And then you get to a point where you say, does anybody want to do anything else? And you go, no. And then it goes, cool. Now let's resolve it from top to bottom. Yeah. So like the lightning bolt will hit the Tim, but Tim's ability is already out there. It's already been activated. So that one damage will still hit, but Tim will be dead when the damage hits. So yeah, I do remember having a lot of, because if people don't know, back in the day, there was another card type called interrupt, and cards like Fork and a few others had that on their type line instead of instants. And so we would often argue, no, the interrupt happens before the instance happen, because why does interrupt exist if it's not faster than instant?
Right.
Yeah.
It broke the stacking of events. That the only thing that could come up was another interrupt, I think, or something.
So you'd be like, I did an interrupt, and that has to happen now before this other stuff happened. So if somebody casts a counterspell on something, you could still cast a lightning bolt above the counterspell. Doesn't make sense with instance interrupts. I remember arguing about that a lot.
I remember even the sort of discovery of instant speed. Like when we first started, we were just casting instants like sorceries. You know, it would be like, all right, it's my turn. Lightning bolt you for 3. You know?
Right.
And when you guys, I think, were the play group that were like, no, before my turn, we're going to do this and that. And we were all like,
what? Wait, before
on your turn?
The end of your turn.
Yeah, we learned the end of your turn. And the fact that like you always have a chance, right? Like they don't get to just go, my turn's over, go. You go, nope, hold on. I want to act before I start my turn. Yeah. I think we had read Inquest or some books or something, or some magazines or something by then, and learned some of that stuff. One thing I remember, I don't know if you remember this, Greg, was we played Giant Growth as an enchantment.
Oh, yeah.
We would just cast Giant Growth onto it and be like, it's got +3/+3 forever now.
The best card ever.
It's like amazing.
1 green.
At instant speed, 1 green. I remember us arguing also about, remember artifacts used to say mono artifacts sometimes, and whether they were still active if they were tapped or not. So like if a Howling Mine became tapped, would you still draw the cards?
Was it deactivated? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
How do you think that works? Do you think that...
So if you tap like a Howling Mine...
You remember what Howling Mine does, right?
Yeah. Draw the extra card,
yeah.
I think it would still work. I'm going to go with that.
Why would it be able to be tapped? What would it do being tapped? Nothing.
Yeah, right. You don't have to tap it for the ability to activate.
The Howling Mine can't tap itself, so something else would have to tap it, like a Twiddle or something. I'm just using cards they know the names of.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah. Okay, so let's say I twiddle... It comes to my turn. I draw the extra card for Howling Mine. It's my Howling Mine. And then I twiddle it so it's tapped and it passes the turn to you. Would you draw an extra card or not, do you think?
I think yes.
What do you think, Greg?
Maybe 2 out of 5 confidence, I would say no.
So
you're just doing that based on his reaction to my answer.
I think
if it's 2 out of 5 confidence,
I'm
you're
slightly
saying
better
no,
than guessing.
Doesn't that mean yes?
No.
Because 3 out of 5 is yes there.
Wait, hold on. Let's break this down.
1 out of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No, and then there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes, I'm still in the no. Like a kind of a shrug.
Okay, yeah. So if it's tapped and it has static ability, you won't draw. Yeah.
That's correct. So I was wrong.
Yeah, Ty was wrong and Greg was right.
Okay, so it's 1
but
to 1.
you can do that with like winter orbs and stuff, and so you untap and they don't, or things like that.
Yes.
There's tricks you can pull. But I remember back in the day that was not clear, and it was hard to find that information. I remember arguing about that quite a lot. Let me ask you a question about something specific. Do you remember the mechanic banding?
I think I do. Yeah. I mean, I remember the mechanic. Could I explain it?
Yeah. Do you remember how this is a thing that they don't print banding on cards very often anymore? Every once in a while, it's kind of like a half joke. They'll do like one. And most players, even players that have played for a long time, it's kind of a joke in the community that most people don't know how banding even works. Do you guys know how? Do you remember, or can you explain how banding works?
I think I do.
Okay.
You want to try, or do you want me to?
Greg's
try?
shaking his head pretty vigorously.
Let me start. And
Are you a 3 out of
the blanks?
3 out of 5 confidence on this
Maybe
one?
4.
Okay.
Maybe 4.
Have we heard?
If you're attacking with banding, you need to have all of the cards but one need to have banding, I believe.
Yeah. So you can form a band on attack
With all but one of the characters.
with
have
any
banding.
number of creatures, but only one of them can be without banding.
Right.
Okay.
On defense, you need one with banding to create a
So a
band.
band on defense only needs 1 banding total and can be any number of creatures.
Right. If you have banding,
That's not all. That's not the only way it works. Yep.
yeah, you have control over where the damage is assigned
Correct.
to you, like on defense. So if you come at me with a Singir Vampire 4/4, thank you.
Yep, I'm-
Flying.
Good
and
memory.
let's just say you're banding, which I think at that point you would also need to have all. Do you need to have all flying creatures in a band?
Well, you have to be
stop
flying
the
to
vampire?
block.
But you need
should,
one?
Maybe you should
Let's just stick
revise
with
who's attacking.
Let's go to a
you.
Crawworm, which is
there
definitely
you go.
6/4.
Bring him back. Yeah. And you have a Benelish hero.
Okay. So a 6/4 is attacking you, and you have a band of creatures
2/2s,
blocking it.
let's just say.
A Benalish hero. Good memory.
thank you,
That
thank
one
you.
of the banding creatures. Benalish hero, and let's say 3 other 2/2s.
Yeah.
Right.
So what happens? The 6/4 you block with your band. It's 4 2/2s. One of them is a Benalish hero.
You can assign all 6 to 1, so you only lose the 1, or you can divvy it up. And so if it's less than 6, if it's 3 and you have 3 2/2s, you can go, okay, they each take 1, they all live, your guy dies.
So you have the ability to control where the damage is assigned. You're correct in how it works. And
Pound it.
and then on attacks, if you're attacking now, how did the damage work? The same way?
If you're banned and you're attacking a non-banned,
Well, yeah, exactly.
well, I guess if they would have to block with multiple creatures, but then I think you would get to assign the
You
damage.
still get assigned the damage you
Yeah.
get back, but you, as play per usual, is assigning your damage. Right?
They can block with a single creature. They can block a whole band with one creature.
Right, but then
You get to assign that damage.
you get to assign their damage.
Whereas
right,
the
I
defender
understand, yeah.
usually gets to
Oh,
assign
I see what you're
damage.
saying. Yeah.
All right, pretty good. I would say most players couldn't get as far as you guys got, which is an advantage to having played a lot back then. Do you guys remember regeneration?
Oh yes.
How does regeneration work?
Well, your creature can die, and then you pay a cost, and it will come back to life.
With one key feature that's different. It comes back tapped.
It
Oh,
comes
right.
back tapped.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Now, did the creature actually die?
It never makes it to the graveyard.
Right.
I don't think ever. So you can't
You
have a
can't
card
have
that
it hit the
pulls
graveyard
it.
and then be like, oh no, I'm going to regenerate
Yes.
it. You have to immediately.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So back in the day, and I believe it did work this way, it was like it died and then like a trigger would go on the stack, like a question saying, do you want to pay a green? Or let's say Drudge Skeletons, which is one of Greg's favorite cards. Do you remember what that card does?
0/1.
1/1.
Dang it, Ty.
That was the Will-O-Wisps.
oh yeah, sorry. That was my favorite.
Yeah,
It
Will-O-Wisp.
was flying.
Flying.
Yeah.
0/1,
1 black to regenerate.
1 black. and
Yeah,
1 to
so-
cost.
It seemed so powerful.
Yeah, it's like, how do you ever get through that?
Yeah.
Greg would play like 4 of them in all the decks. You're like, I could never attack.
Totally. You needed trample or something.
Yeah. So yeah, I believe it would like take the damage and then ask you basically, do you want to play the black or not? And if you did, it would just become tapped and not die. Now it's works slightly differently. They codified it a little differently, which is it's kind of like a shield almost that you put on it. You have to pay the cost before the damage happens.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And then it puts a regeneration kind of shield on it. I believe that's how the rules got worded now. Because they've had to codify a lot of stuff back in the day. It was kind of like, you figure it out. But then eventually they're like, well, we got to know how this works for tournaments and things like that. So when we started playing, yeah, Greg, when we started, I believe you were playing, it was like Unlimited, Arabian Nights, Antiquities were like most of the cards in your card pool. And then eventually the Dark and Legends, that was kind of the main
Dark
sets.
was when I had started to put some maybe more money into it because I was like, oh, I'm sticking with this, and
Yeah,
the new
this is
stuff's
fun.
coming out. So
Yeah,
I
the
had a
Dark
lot
was
of
when you
Dark,
really dove
yeah.
in. Yeah. Okay, so back around that time period, which is when I just was framing it for them so they know about the time period. What do you think was the strongest color?
So don't know if I can answer this this will take a little longer, but
And
when
afterwards,
we
give us
first
your confidence level. Yeah.
It was just throwing out creatures,
Yeah.
throwing them against each other, kind of fun. And at some point, we started really connecting the dots of how these cards played together. So I had a green deck, and I think I got a Lord of the Pit and maybe a Singir, something kind of cool. And I'm like, I'm playing black all the way.
And one of my early memories of you is just loving black.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then at some point, so it was just like, oh, cool cards, throw them together. And then at some point, I think it was one of our friends at our school, at our gatherings, that played a deck. And I don't think it was you, but it was the Meekstone, I believe. Andy, right?
Yep.
And the Meekstone was brilliant because he made this deck of small creatures, 2/2, under, with things like giant growth for temporary bumps. And we would bring out our big beasts and things, and then the Meekstone would come out, and we realized he built this whole deck, which sounds obvious now, right? But when the first time
this was the
you
realization,
see it happen,
sure.
it was like, wait a second, his whole deck doesn't get affected by this thing, and he's pumping them up, and we're screwed. We can't untap anything. And we're like, oh, this is how it works. Like, that's why this card looked dumb, because why would you play a Meekstone? You can't play your big characters. And so that's where we started. I think the Meekstone was where everything came together, that this is how Magic was supposed to work.
I'm getting goosebumps because the Meekstone is exactly my memory of the click in your head of like,
right?
Themes.
We all had that.
Yeah, synergy. That was the first time we didn't know the word synergy, but probably the first time I realized synergy. Yeah, I remember the Meekstone deck. He had Royal Assassins, Black Knights, Hypnotic Specters, Dark Rituals, Meekstones. And
he had Assassins?
Yeah. For one thing, he had traded for 4 of everything too. And that was, I think, one of the first decks in our whole play group where he knew what he wanted to do and got 4 of stuff. It's hard to explain, but back in the day, there was a restricted list, which meant that you could only have 1 of certain cards. So he had 1 Demonic Tutor, 1 Soul Ring, the things you were allowed to only have 1 of. But everything else he had, if he had it, he had 4 of it. And that was another thing where it's like, oh, you need to be really efficient with it. And I remember the Meekstone would dominate in our play group for, a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
I totally remember that. And that was the very first like aha moment, I think. And that's funny that you mentioned it, and me for playing Magic. So I'm glad you mentioned that. But does that mean you think black was the most powerful color?
No, I remember that happening and changing. That like my awesome Lord of the Pit thing is like, oh no, that this is easy to handle.
Yeah.
No, I would say early Magic for me would be blue, and mostly because it was surprises and the surprise deck. I was going to say that like FU deck, but like, taking your creature, messing with you, countering your spell, like just always kind of messing with your mind. So they didn't have the big
blue
creatures.
Was the most powerful.
Yeah, because it was unpredictable and could go against anything, or it felt that way with
What do you think, Ty? What do you think was the most powerful color?
I think at the beginning, I liked blue, but it felt like red was the thing we had to overcome because we were so simplistic that just fireball,
disintegrate.
It just was like, it was better than what you were doing. But I definitely remember your guys' play group teaching us the synergy aspect. I remember the tournament. I don't know if we're going to get to that.
Yeah, we will for sure. But by then you were playing Synergistic Death, so it wasn't the tournament that got you there.
Barely.
Oh.
We had just stumbled on like, hey, these 2 cards go together. Let's do that. And getting 4. And then, but we still had people in our group with like giant decks. They just put everything in there.
Yeah.
And
Our friend Matt, he would always come with like an 85 card deck.
Yeah.
I remember us shaking our head knowing like, well, you're lowering the chances of getting your best cards.
Yeah. But that was still
But it took us a while to learn that too.
Yeah, you guys really, gave us the discipline.
Well, by the time you stopped playing, which was only a few years later, you guys, probably stopped by probably like 96, 97, 98, somewhere in there.
96.
What did you think was the most powerful color?
I think I would, having been educated by you and all your decks, I would probably go with blue. Because that's what was kicking our butt at the time.
I think maybe that's also what informs me is the things that would mess me up the most was blue. It's not what I played with the most, but it's what
I think most Magic players right now in Commander would say that, if you had to rank the colors, blue's probably the most powerful still.
Now.
Yeah. What would you say was probably the weakest color back then?
White.
Yeah, I was going to say white.
Was.
Yeah, it was hard to get there.
That's interesting because I think until very recently, white would have been the answer as well for that still to this day. Although I think green was the worst back when we played.
Because
it just seemed like creatures were not very good.
But getting mana It always seemed like green found its way into your deck because it was always like, oh, I have this cool idea. It's a 4-drop or whatever. And, well, here comes the Llanowar Elves and,
Birds of Paradise.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's
Birds
true.
of Paradise.
It allowed you to play multiple colors a little bit easier. Yeah, so maybe not much has changed as far as like the top is probably the same and the bottom is probably. I think you can make an argument that red is the weaker color now, but yeah, it's not green. Green's very powerful. It's probably the second most powerful. Green and black are pretty close. What are some of the favorite cards you remember playing? Ty, what are cards that come to mind of like the favorite ones that you used to like to play?
Tim, definitely Tim. Unsummon, I don't know why that comes to mind. It's just a real like, just get them.
It's that
you have
trickiness
an enchant creature just comes off, like love it.
Oh man, I remember an early deck Greg had when you were playing your black deck and you had Unholy Strength stuff, and it just felt like, I can't win. Like that Black Knight has first strike and it's huge
First strike,
now.
4/2
Yeah, because we didn't know, and then until we learned about removal.
Yeah.
Cards went through phases, like where when we learned what they did,
Right.
they became game changers, and we found the counter to it. So
Right.
it always shifted.
Yeah.
That was the beauty of who found the counter to it. Control Magic, I hated. I hated because I'd finally get out my card and Control Magic, which is simple, but arming the other person and stripping it from you. I loved my Fallen Angel. I think I had one, got it randomly. Just like the art, like the idea that I could have a lot of minions and sacrifice to her for one big foul swing.
Yeah, I remember you would do that thing where you would have a bunch of stuff out, Will-O-Wisp and other things, and then Fallen Angel would get through, sack them all, and you just hit us for 12 or
Could be a
something
big
out of nowhere.
strike,
Yeah.
It was more the decks that I think of that I remember building certain themed decks that, for better or worse, I enjoyed or clung to because I liked the theme or they performed well-ish.
More so than individual cards.
Yeah, I guess that's how I think of it. But
It's interesting you mentioned Control Magic, though. That is a effect they don't do that as often anymore, and I think Control Magic's still a very strong version of it as far as cost. Because you're right. I think they didn't really realize even in design how powerful it is because it's destroying their thing and giving you a thing, and so it's still actually a pretty powerful card in like a limited environment. It doesn't get played in Commander so much anymore.
the simple counter spell, what a beautiful card.
Yeah. I liked anything that kicked out a bunch of creatures, like the Hive or something. It's like, give me 10 1/1s,
Just give me a lot.
Yeah. Then I got options.
Spawn, that green, not thralls.
Thralls.
The spory things.
The breeding pit.
Right.
Oh, the spore thing. Saprolings?
Saprolings.
Yeah, something that would like...
just generate 0/1 tokens.
That was like a release that happened right at the... I have a lot of those for some reason, and I don't really like them, but...
Oh, the Fallen Empires ones? The ones that like...
All the spores.
Got spore counters, and you had to keep track of a lot of counters.
Yeah.
Do you guys remember what we used to use as counters on the cards?
We used a dice? A 20-sided dice?
No, we didn't. Well, we didn't have 20-sided dice. So I don't even think 20-sided dice were easy to come by at that point.
Doritos?
Pennies?
We used pennies, nickels, and dimes a lot. And then we also used like those little glass bead things.
Oh, like the Pente...
from the game, I had a game called Bazaar.
Yeah.
And they had little glass,
colored
glass.
Beads, and I thought maybe I was wrong.
Yeah. We had this
That's
little
right.
Tupperware container that we would like that had pennies, nickels, dimes, and the glass beads. And that's what we would use for the various counters. Yeah. We could have just used dice from like Yahtzee or something, but we didn't really do that.
Yeah, that was pretty advanced.
It wasn't like you could walk into any game store and buy dice like was today. There wasn't a lot of just game stores in general. Okay, well, let's talk about the decks. Because the Meekstone deck, I remember being, for us, the first big deck in our group. Do you remember a deck in your group, Ty? Because up to this point, what we've been talking about, you hadn't really mixed with our group quite yet,
right?
Ty.
Yeah.
What was going on in your group? Do you remember any of the decks that were sort of big with your playgroup?
I mean, we were, like Greg said, we were just doing a lot of creature battles. It was like elemental decks versus the green deck versus the white-black deck.
Do you remember any specific cards in there that were like, problems?
I mean, it was just like Sarah Angel, Singer Vampire,
The big flyers. Air elementals.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Air and water elemental, fire elemental, walls were a big deal. Like everybody had walls. We had wall of air and
wall.
Wall of brambles. And we just crunched in the middle. And then we did start messing around with, mess with the game cards like Armageddon or there's an egg, Dingus Egg.
Dingus Egg, yep.
Or just, Ankh maybe.
Yep.
But we didn't know how to minimize the effect on your own deck. It was just sort of people would throw them out there and nuke the game like stasis. All right.
What happens? I don't know.
Yeah, right. But
Which later became like the theme of your deck, I think.
But we eventually, I think the combo we stumbled upon, which is so dumb, is Karma Magical Hack.
Yep.
which was our first like theme deck, and it just tore through everybody.
Walk me through that. Karma Magical
Karma
Hack.
is a card that is 2 normal and 2 white, and it's an enchantment, and it does damage per turn to the number of swamps that you have.
To
and
each
you
player.
could hack this
To
land
each
type.
player that has swamps. And then you Magical Hack changes any plains, mountains, any land
Any
type
land type into any other
into
land type.
one. You know?
Whatever their deck was, you just choose that color.
And that
Blue
the game
at
would
the heart of
basically end at that point because they'd be taking 8, per
turn.
Yeah.
Is that a thing that exists that changed card text now? Like
They don't do it very often, but there's been a few different variants where you can do stuff like that for sure. But Magical Hex, I'd say, is still the emblem for that kind of strategy. And you can still kind of do it. There's Sleight of Mind, which changes colors.
Yeah, we messed around with that, and someone
Circle
made
of
us
Protection,
after
Sleight of
in
Mind.
that's what we did in the wake of it. It was like, oh, we can change the words. Let's do that.
Yeah. So Circle of Protections with Sleight of Minds was another thing that people would do. OG years would probably still do a little bit, but it tends to just be like, okay, well, I can't die, but what else with the Circle of Protection thing?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember your Karma Magical Hack deck, which I was like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it was pretty effective because a lot of people played black. So a lot of times we didn't even need the Magical Hack. We'd just be like, bam, there you go, Karma.
You're like, oh, you have the silver bullet against my deck. You just happen to? Well, I do have Magical Hacks.
Right.
Yeah.
there were those cards in each color that was like targeted their opposites that always kind of
Yes.
drove me a little bonkers.
Death Grip and Life Force.
Life Force, and exactly those two. And it felt like if you won with that, it's like, yeah, you got lucky. You played.
I
knew
just
that I'd
happened
been
to be
playing
playing
black, and you made the deck to beat mine rather than it's universally good.
I remember for a time we started we wouldn't tell you what we were playing before the game because of cards like that. And that kind of got rid of those cards in our playgroup where it was like, I'm not going to allow you to choose your deck based on knowing what my deck is just because you have one of those in it.
Right.
And so we started being like, okay, we're going to reveal our decks. And then that caused us to take out the sort of silver bullet
We
cards.
stopped using those. Yeah, kind of like we decided internally to not use those.
Well, I think it was just bad. You weren't going to, your chance of them actually doing anything in a game was much lower.
Right.
It was super fun though when you bust out like there was that one red. I forget the name.
Red
of it.
Elemental Blast.
Yeah, and you just like have it, and just be like, ha.
I'd say that's still playable today because blue is so prevalent. There's enough of it that you're likely to run into it in games, and that card is so efficient and does a thing that red can't really do in another way. You can counter blue things, basically. Red Elemental Blast specifically still definitely sees play.
Yeah, do we just throw it in speculatively, like, we're going to see a blue deck, or whatever. Yeah.
What other decks do you guys remember playing with or against that were like, what were cool decks that you built?
One of my first theme deck was, I think initially it was black and red, and I stayed with that for a long time. And it was, I'm not going to play with creatures. I'm going to go with power and defend myself as best I can. So it was like Will-o'-the-Wisps, Drudge Skeletons, like Resurrectors, or some sort of like defense.
Regenerators, yep.
No attackers. And then it was all of the, lightning, fireball, disintegrate.
All the burn spells.
Yeah, the burn spells. I'm trying to remember what else I did with the black. Well, so then I had to work really hard to find a fork. Like that was one I got like my uncle to drive me. I mean, I don't know where I got it from. Maybe I hitched a ride with you, but found like a fork to buy for like $25 or something. Like
Nah, it wasn't that much. I don't think any cards were that much then.
the fork was restricted. It was like, I don't know if anyone else had one. I think I was the only one that had it
At
for
first,
a while.
for sure, you were the first one because I remember us being like, whoa.
Yeah, and forking a 15-point fireball or even 10, it was like game over.
I died to a lot of fireballs for 10 forked from you.
Yeah.
I remember that deck. You
And I
eventually
just had
changed.
to survive, and then bam, as long as you didn't counterspell me.
I felt like that was the next deck in the meta after the Meekstone deck because it could beat the Meekstone deck because it was small enough. You could block all his stuff with your regenerators, and then you would just draw the game out until you had enough mana to kill him. Mm-hmm. And I remember that deck being like really tough to beat for a while. So that, in my memory, in my narrative of our progression, Meekstone was the deck, and then your burn deck was the response to it, and the next boss deck in our playgroup was like, okay, now we got to figure out how to overcome this very light creature. It didn't have a lot of creatures, and up till then, even the Meekstone deck were creature-based decks,
Right.
and you built the first. Oh, this is not about the creatures in it. He's got a few, but those are really just to stop the other creatures. Yeah. But what he's really doing is all spell-based crap.
Right. And I think that's when you started going more blue and messing with the counter spells. I think that's where that came up.
It's interesting because we didn't have the internet, so our meta was just naturally evolving. And I think
An arms race.
Yeah, in some ways, because you were driving, trying to get to the. It's funny that part of this whole equation was not just do I have the. First of all, we're like 14 years old or whatever, so just having money to buy cards was one thing. But it was also the hurdle of like I have to get to where the card is, Because it's not like, hey, I just get it on and order it on the internet or something. You literally had to like get an uncle or an older brother of somebody to like drive you to 2 towns over where they might have it, or you called and they said they had it.
I didn't buy many cards though either. I also that was like maybe one of just a handful that I actually paid money for. It felt so important to me to have one fork.
Yeah.
In case I get it.
Oh, I remember it working. I remember doing damage. What about you, Ty? Do you remember any of your early decks?
Yeah. I mean, I think I remember going against the discard deck that you had.
I was going to say,
that was one of my last decks.
Yeah. And that was kind of that was an eye opener. Because we hadn't really attacked like the phases of the game at all.
Or the other resources in the game.
Right, exactly. I don't know. My one big deck that I only ever really could build was the Tim deck, I guess. And I went and I bought a clone or 2 clones, and it was a lot of your cards.
Yeah, you built it with a bunch of my cards.
Yeah, because I sort of stopped buying cards once our playgroups merged, because then I was like, oh, you have all these good cards, and I just will make decks out of these. And I just didn't have like the firepower to be putting together like a discard deck. I don't think I had a rack,
Right.
So yeah, and then of course the draw deck, the wave deck.
Yeah, we'll talk about the wave deck, which is an interesting from a lot of levels. But the Tim deck, people should know out there. So Ty built the first Tim deck in our playgroup. I'm known for the Tim deck now in the community for the commander version of a Tim deck, but you were really the first person that put a whole, like, I'm going to say standard. It wasn't really standard then. There wasn't really formats in the way there are now, but the 60 card version of it. You had like pirate ships and
Rod of Ruin.
I think you had twiddles
some
and
mana.
stuff.
Yeah. I definitely had an untapped tab. There was a green enchantment that let you
Instill energy.
Yeah, instill energies. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was slow, but it was so fun when it got going.
And once you got going, you were really playing with timing, and there were so many little tricks you could pull that you would be like, I can't play this. He'll just kill it for free. But if he doesn't, then he's hitting me, and I don't even know how to get out of this.
Just the threat of it kept you from playing anything.
Yeah, but the threat of it was also like you put one out, and all of a sudden everyone looks at you.
Everyone comes.
It's like, oh no, you don't.
We were playing in a group. Yeah.
That's when you know your deck is good, when everyone's like, oh, we got to kill that deck. Yeah.
Well, once you get
When
like
you're the
4
first to
out,
be
nobody can
eliminated.
even lay a creature without your permission. You're just sitting there going, I'll allow it.
Hand of God. You may.
I remember you had a goblin deck too, Greg.
Oh yeah.
It was
That
a
was
Goblin
pretty
deck.
good.
Goblin deck was just kind of fun. I don't know if it was very good. I got the breeding or the Goblin Warrens
Goblin
or
Warrens.
the breeding pit or
Goblin-
something.
You had a
that
couple
kind of-
goblin kings.
Yeah, Goblin Kings helped, and then there was also, I think, the grenade or the bomb. What was it
Goblin
called?
Grenade.
Goblin Grenade.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the sacrifice. So being able to breed, pump them up, and suddenly, if it got to like a critical mass where they were like all 5/5s coming out, and every turn I'm cranking out 2, sacrifice 2, get 3, it'd build.
Yeah, that was a fun
But
one.
it took, that one was one that, if you let it go, would become dangerous. Early on was not too big of a deal to deal with. That wasn't a great one. I remember your Vice deck, which at some point came, was really cool. That's what inspired my rack or discard deck. It played differently, but building it around the Vice's opposite was one of my favorite decks. But your Vice deck how did you do that? You would cram cards into people's hands and punish them for
Stormseeker.
it, basically. Was that the Stormseeker deck?
That was the
Vice
This
deck?
was the wave deck eventually, but early on,
that is the
so
wave
Black
deck,
Vice
okay.
early on was a very strong card that just like tended to do a lot of damage. So I would just put it into decks. Like when we were early playing, just put Black Vices in there. And early on, it wasn't on the restricted list. Eventually, it was.
Oh, it's restricted.
Yeah, eventually it was, but
They
yeah,
learned.
yeah, that you could only have one. But in our early days, either we didn't know it was restricted yet, or it hadn't been put on the list yet.
I don't
But we did
remember
know other cards that were restricted, so I think it just hadn't been put on the
Yeah.
list yet. But anyway, yeah, it was a card that just says if you during I think your upkeep, if you have
4 more.
more than four
four,
cards,
more
you
than
take a
4.
damage for each one over 4 or whatever. So if they have 7 cards, it does 3. So if you get that thing out on turn 1, it's going to deal a lot before they can do much, especially in our playgroups, which were slow and not very efficient. Like people were often not doing anything until at least the second or third turn. We learned later, like, hey, do stuff early, use your mana efficiently, but it took us a while. So yeah, the Vice was very powerful.
You would shut out the mana. You would do Power Surge to lock our mana out, or Polar, or I don't remember what
Mana
I would put
short.
in it. Mana short. Yeah, just shut us down so you couldn't act, and then we
Yeah.
just all take 7
and
damage.
unsummons. I loved unsummons for that
Yeah.
reason, because that's an extra damage
Yep.
and it gets the creature off the board. And then they got to recast it. Don't do anything else.
I remember you used to argue, no, but it's fun to play against because you get all your cards.
Yeah.
And you're just sitting there with all your cards taking 10 damage.
I'm like,
and
aren't you having
dying.
fun?
Yeah,
you have lots of
hilarious.
cards.
That's a real riot.
That's why they know what Howling Mind does. Because I think
Right.
to me, I slowly started being like, oh, Howling Mind's good with Vices. I'll put that in. Oh, Unsummon's good with Vices. I'll put that in. So I didn't like holistically ever be like, I'll create this whole deck. It sort of organically, over slow optimization over time.
You know what's wild?
What?
I have like hundreds of Magic cards memorized, right? Name, cost, rules, text. But the moment I have to remember like 3 passwords, I'm cooked.
That's why all my passwords are just pay the one.
Dude, we're recording this.
Oh crap, I'm ruined.
Don't worry, it'll be fine because we can use 1Password to get you back up and running. 1Password's award-winning password manager is the best way to keep your business's data and login credentials secure. You can set strong, unique passwords for all your accounts without relying on memorization or post-it notes. And 1Password makes security easy for your whole team. It's super user-friendly with simple, secure sharing. Plus, it's seamless to switch between devices. Whether you need access from your phone or laptop, it's always a breeze, especially with features like autofill for quick sign-ins. Best of all, once you don't have to remember your passwords anymore, you won't accidentally say them on camera.
Yeah, I wish I'd been using 1Password this whole time. This seems great. Okay, my new password is Ristic.
No, cut the tape!
Right now, our listeners get a free 2-week trial at 1password.com/commandzone for your growing business. That's 2 free weeks at 1password.com/commandzone.
Don't let security slow your business down. Go to 1password.com/commandzone.
This show is sponsored by Liquid IV.
Season's greetings, cool cats! This year, I, Jetmir, Nexus of Revels, will throw the most perfect holiday party! This whole crime family will come together as the Halo Fountain! Well, look. We may have used up all of our angel juice at my Meowloween masquerade, but fear not. I found a new source of hydration to keep everyone fully pumped. Liquid IV. It's the best way to stay hydrated through the holidays with 8 vitamins and nutrients plus 3 times the electrolytes of the leading sports drink. 1 stick of Liquid IV with 16 ounces of water hydrates better than water alone, so you can tear, pour, and live more. Never let the party leave you parched again, whether you need to stay vigilant on Commander Night, trample the dance floor, or double strike a pose on the runway. Proper hydration is a must. Halo was good, but this pina colada flavor is simply divine. Hey, how do they make this stuff?
No angels were harmed in the making of Liquid IV.
Stay hydrated through the holidays with Liquid IV. Get 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com and use code COMMAND at checkout. That's 20% off your first order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code COMMAND at liquidiv.com.
I think it might need more card draw.
Who are you talking to? Or is that just something you say?
Oh, no, I'm on a call with Jimmy. We're building a Chatterfang deck.
Ooh, I just added Toski. That should help, right?
Whoa, the card just showed up.
Yeah, with ARCHIDEKT, you can collaborate in real time from anywhere in the world.
Changes show up immediately. You don't even have to reload the page.
So it's perfect for brewing with a friend.
This is cool, but isn't Jimmy just upstairs?
Yeah, but I'm downstairs right now.
I ain't coming downstairs. ARCHIDEKT is the best place to browse, brew, and playtest Commander decks. Just go to archidekt.com/commandzone to get started.
That's ARCHIDEKT.com/commandzone. I want to talk about your discard deck because I remember that deck being very strong.
Yeah.
And that was what Ty said, a moment where I realized, oh, you can attack a different resource than their life total to win the game. And I think that was another aha moment for me was you were like, oh, I'm just going to strip out of the cards out of their hand. And then not only will they take damage from the rack, but even if I don't get the rack out, it's bad for them because they just don't have anything they can really do.
Yeah, it was painful when you got behind on the discard deck. So it was black, blue. I had Hypnotic Specters. I used, 1 black to get 3 black?
Dark Ritual?
Dark Ritual.
Yeah, if you turn 1 Dark Ritual and Hypnotic Spectre, I was like, oh, no.
turn 1.
Yeah.
Hypnotic Spectre out. I did use, they were maybe a little underpowered, but the Mind Stab Thralls.
Yep.
When they got through, I could sacrifice them for a random card. Mind Twist or
Mind
something,
Twist,
which was, I think, restricted.
You can only have 1. That card's still good in Commander. It's a little underrated.
On the blue end, too, there was a lot of the Spell Blast, tap 1 more to...
That's what I remember as your sort of counterspell deck. It had a counterspell package.
Yeah, and unsummon.
Yep. Because you could unsummon it, make them discard it.
Lose it.
I swear there was an artifact that allowed you to tap and make them discard. It was kind of expensive, but you could at least repeatedly do
I
it.
don't remember what it was. I remember the last card I got for it, and I only found one of them was a Time Elemental because I had a hard time getting rid of, someone would have a stumper card for me that was sometimes it was a land or an artifact that would get out and I couldn't get rid of it.
Yeah.
And so the Time Elemental would let you take any permanent. And unsummon it.
And unsummon it, yeah. Which is powerful because black and blue are not very good at dealing with certain types of permanents.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that deck being quite strong. And you said you remember playing against it.
Oh, yeah. I remember that one. I remember you had, one of you, maybe both, had a discard a giant deck. Was that yours?
Oh, that was me.
Josh had the graveyard deck where he would discard for several turns, and then bring back to life.
Turn 1 and plop like here's Nicodemus or whatever in the discard pile. Like, oh, why is he discarding that? Okay, whatever.
I think we fought about that one for a while. Like, is this? Can you do this? Didn't it have to like die before it can?
That was one of our arguments for sure. I remember. Oh, I totally forgot about this. Yeah, so I had a deck, and just like they said, turn 1. I would do nothing. I would draw my card, and then I'd go to my end step and have to discard because I have 8 cards. And I would discard something big, and then I would animate dead it. Then I play my animate dead it, and then they would argue you can't animate dead it because it didn't die.
Right. Didn't ever go to the graveyard. Really.
It did go to the graveyard, but yeah. Turns out that I was doing it. It was allowed, but I remember the arguments about it. That's pretty.
It was allowed in the end. It was.
Oh yeah, it's totally illegal. It doesn't. The anything that animates something from a graveyard does not care how it got into the graveyard. It just says, is it in the graveyard? If the answer is yes,
Turn 3, some giant would come out.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Terrible.
Discard a giant.
I really loved you had a deck which I think was called the Sooner Than Instant Death deck.
Oh yeah.
I think it might have been my favorite deck to play. It was sort of like the Meekstone deck, although I don't think it had Meekstones. It was like Unstable Mutation, Giant Growth, Lightning Bolt. It tried to win in 3 or 4 or 5 turns or lose.
The quick pumps.
Yeah.
Bloodlust. And
Bloodlust. That's right.
It had Curd Apes and Scribe Sprites.
Yeah, anything that was...
all 1-drops and all pump spells and Lightning Bolt type stuff.
That was a really fun one. I always liked the decks that took cards that weren't on their face powerful, which is why the discard deck is so great, because it all of a sudden brought all these cards into play that you hadn't really, the Thralls and stuff, didn't seem like that valuable, but all of a sudden you have this entire genre of stuff you're doing.
Right.
It was really, attractive way to play. Yeah.
I remember that the discard deck for sure being like a pretty big linchpin. So you had a couple of, I don't know if those were back to back, but as I think about our men in our play group, a couple of moments where it was like, oh, Greg had the sort of boss deck, the deck that you had to like consider when you were building, will I be able to beat that deck? And then you had to try and be like, I can't have big creatures because of the Meekstone deck. I got to have some way to get through these regenerative creatures that he's got. And then, okay, what am I going to do about all this discard? So that's one of the reasons I came up with the discard a giant deck, was because, now if I'm discarding cards, it might be good for me.
So that came after the discard deck. Okay.
Yeah, for sure. So
makes sense.
Yeah, that play counterplay though, which still exists in play groups all over the world to this day, I think is one of the most fun things about games, right? Is that like you do one thing and then they do this and then you do that and then you learn this move and then they learn that one. That's the fun of it, is just figuring out that, post repost.
And as we played in groups too, knowing how that it wasn't just like, oh, this is the deck that beats someone else's deck, but it had to stand on its own legs in a group. You know, we started playing more and more in groups, which also had a whole nother element of negotiating with other players, which I don't know what people do now, but it was like, Ty, I promise I will help you this next turn.
Big time.
Will you help me take down Josh?
Yeah, for sure. We used to play a lot of made up formats as far as like, the decks were the same. We didn't usually change the rules of how decks could work, but we would change how we were playing. So I remember playing a lot of games with more than one-on-one.
Yeah.
A lot. Did you guys do that in your original playgroup, Ty? Or was it?
Yeah, we did. We would play like, 2-on-2, or we'd play free for all if there was 3 of us.
You had a giant,
Yeah.
Single sorcerer we played a lot. Where you share your mana pool and life total.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah. And we would make up formats. So like we played blind magic.
I was gonna say, do you remember playing blind magic?
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a second because I don't even remember all the rules. Maybe you can help me piece them together. But but it is interesting that by default we were playing multiplayer, because Magic for many years was mostly a 1v1 game. And only in the last 6 or 7 years has Commander become the most popular way to play. The normal pot is 4 players in a multiplayer game. And therefore the social dynamics and the sort of politics and intrigue that you're talking about, Greg, the werewolf or mafia part of the game comes into play. That felt really natural to me because I had come up playing a ton of multiplayer Magic with us. And that's just the way we decided to play. It wasn't in the rule book that way.
Right.
Do you remember why? Was it just natural to do that? Or
I want to say it was like, there's 3 of us sitting around and somebody doesn't want to wait. And so it's just like, all right, let's all try to kill each other. I mean, it's a very natural, next step, I think.
They had a multiplayer rule.
Did they?
I think they had something like that. Not the two-headed giant, not those details initially, but they had like how you took turns. Didn't we pull it out of the playbook? We didn't make it up, did we?
I've heard a lot of people do it. I'm not saying we made it up exactly, but I don't remember ever reading anything about it. But we could have, because it's been a long time, so I don't remember everything.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, but I do remember all those little deals and stuff, which we still do. If you watch game nights, there's still all kinds of, hey, if you kill that, I won't attack you. Or, hey, if I don't do this, will you just promise to blah, blah, blah? Like, that happens all the time.
Yeah, and
You
then
were
we'd hold
notorious-
grudges from game to game. It'd be like, no, last time.
And I always did against Josh. I feel so bad. I knew he was a very strong player and always like, how do I get someone to help me beat Josh?
Yeah,
It was
Greg,
basically.
Greg was always campaigning against me. You know, honestly, when I think about it now, both of our play groups had the smartest people in the high school in them, right?
Well, certainly me.
Yeah. Ty, you and Jeff were the two 8th graders that were bussed over to the high school because Ty is a year younger than Greg and I are. And my freshman year, I was in the highest math a freshman could be in, but they started this new program where Ty and Jeff, who also played in your play group, came over to take high school geometry your 8th grade year.
Yeah.
And Andy and Kevin, who were in Greg's play group with us, were like valedictorian, known as like 2 of the smartest guys in the school types. Greg was valedictorian, doctor now, obviously. Like, it was a game that smart people played. I don't think we thought of it in those terms, and maybe like nerds played was what we would say then. What do you guys remember about that aspect of it? Do you remember?
Yeah, I mean, I remember playing on the soccer bus and having the coaches sort of give us the side eye and just like, what are you guys doing? And, you know, even to the point where it's like, hey, no magic on the soccer bus. Just because they
remember
didn't
that, them
really
outlining it, yeah.
understand it, I think. If it was gin rummy or something, they wouldn't have cared. But somehow the fact that it was wizards and goblins and stuff, it was objectionable in that way.
Was that on the soccer bus or something
Yeah,
else? I don't remember that. I don't remember getting pushback from teachers or other people. Like, but I don't remember that I felt like I had a dance between all those different groups. I didn't care as much, maybe, but I do remember our chemistry teacher. You might have been there. Ask us, do you guys think this is going to still be, like, we were spending money on cards, and you think this is still going to be worth anything? And is anyone going to be playing this in 5 years? He had the beard or the mustache. And sorry, I didn't mean to. I couldn't do his voice anyway, but he did.
Who's that, Mr. Sprague?
Mr. Sprague, yeah.
Yep.
He was doubting.
Nailed it.
I remember him saying it. Well, when you say teachers, that reminded me of, I totally had forgotten about this, but your original playgroup was like all in the same Spanish class, right?
Yeah.
Or a bunch of them were.
A lot of us were in the.
Do you remember that I used to sneak out of my second period? I wouldn't sneak out. My teacher knew I was doing it. But during Channel 1...
You weren't in that Spanish class.
No, but I would come in and play Magic with you guys,
yeah.
and then I would leave.
Oh, that's so funny.
So
Yeah, we had like 15 minutes of Anderson Cooper, Lisa Ling, Mountain Dew, and Snickers commercials saying, when you miss lunch, whatever.
it was called Channel 1, and it was like a news program that played for like the first, 18 minutes of second period every day.
Yeah.
And during Channel 1, I don't know how I convinced whoever my teacher was.
Mr. Morlock?
No, he was our Spanish teacher that allowed it because he thought
right.
that probably we didn't.
Yeah. So
really liked
Joe
the
Morlock,
news.
who was one of the soccer coaches, Mr. Morlock was the Spanish teacher. So he would obviously allow me to come in. And I'm not sure who my second period teacher was, but I wouldn't even go to my second period. I would go straight to Mr. Morlock's class, play Magic with them during Channel 1, and then leave and go to my class. Do you remember that?
I thought you were in our class.
No, I wasn't in that
I was
class.
like, I remember you playing Magic with us.
Yeah.
Because that's like when some of the Meekstone moment happened was.
Yeah. I was there,
During
but I
Channel
was
1.
not. Then I would just be like, okay, see you guys tomorrow. And I would go to my class.
Funny. Yeah.
Yeah, I just remember like having them out in the cafeteria or really anywhere, and just how, I don't know, like people come by and kind of give you like, what is that, magic? Like, you know, kind of. Like,
You'd get the kind of quintessential like John Hughes jocks
Totally.
nerds dynamic
small
a little
town,
bit.
yeah.
Yeah, I remember a little bit of that sort of, we had a pretty good like group of like nerds didn't feel super nerdy at our school. I don't think in the way that at least movies and stuff made it way, but I remember a little bit about that. What about, because we did run into a little bit of the other part of this, which is like the Satanic Panic period that's kind of famous in Dungeons and Dragons and Magic as well, where there was a certain sort of uproar regarding some of the content, like the demonic tutor, and the Unholy Strength had the pentagram in it, and so did the demonic tutor. You know, at that time there was people were scared of Dungeons and Dragons and saying it was like people worshiping the devil or whatever. That was all happening kind of around that time. And we actually did run into a little bit of that as well.
Yeah. I mean, we lost a member of our playgroup. His parents sort of requested that he not play anymore for those reasons. And
Yeah, he kind of
okay.
one day said, "Sorry guys, I can't play Magic with you." But we're like, why?
Yeah.
He's like, well, religious stuff.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I remember my mom like questioning me kind of like very gently, just like, you know that this isn't like witchcraft, right? And I was like, yeah, it's just a game, right? Yes. Okay, you're good.
Yeah, Mom, we're not actually like carving into our own skin or anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you run into any of that, Greg?
I don't recall that. I remember hearing about for Dungeons and Dragons before I even played, and the principal when I was in 6th grade was like, terrified of it, and I feel like made an announcement to the whole school even or something. Do you remember that?
No.
6th grade?
Was that Mr. Zegeva?
Yes.
It's funny, I remember the names of all the teachers and stuff.
Yeah. But I don't remember. I do remember the pentagram coming off the demonic tutor's forehead and the card being like reprinted. And it was like, what? And maybe a couple other little tweaks that they did to address it or to maybe make it less satanic-y, I guess. So.
Yeah, they definitely did alter some card art, as I recall, in later printings to kind of like address it a little bit. So it was enough to worry them as a company or a game, I guess. They weren't as big, obviously, as they are now. But yeah, that was an interesting time period where...
I got no pushback from my parents, though, or anything like that.
Yeah, me neither. My parents... I don't even remember getting questioned or anything about it from my parents. I think, to be honest, a big part of it was... you guys were involved with it. My parents are like,
good boys.
Yeah. Oh, it's Greg and Ty. It can't be anything that bad because they're good kids.
Yeah, that's why all our spells worked.
Well, I wanted to ask you. Well, our staff really wanted to hear you talk about what kind of player I was back then and what kind of player you think I probably am now.
Well, I mean, counterspells has to be a big part of the story. Like, I just remember you being the counterspell lord, and an instance. You were early on that. I feel like that was a big part of your play identity. What do you think?
Josh was always nimble. His play style always changed. He was always doing something different. So it was really hard to know. He wasn't going to create the same type of deck. Usually it was universal. He wasn't usually focused on like to take one of our other decks down. It was a deck that could handle that, but was universally strong. And you were really good at the communication between us when we're at the table playing to manipulate some other folks to get on your side. So I knew playing you, half of it was your deck, but half of it was the talk game of like getting some help against Josh before he either forces, coerces, or cajoles someone in, to his side.
It's like you didn't really want to make a deal with you because it was helping you out was probably risky. It was going to come back and
even when it looked like a good idea for you, you're like, something bad is going to happen if I make this deal with the devil here.
It seems innocuous. Like it's just a 1/2, but he's got 6 cards over there and he seems awfully happy. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think Jimmy, if he was sitting here, could commiserate with you guys about all that. It's not much of that has changed.
Yeah.
So what do you remember about my decks?
Well, I do remember at one point maybe this is not about the decks, but about your progress with Magic. You invested in trading, I think mostly for multi-lands.
Oh yeah.
And at first it was like, oh, that's cool. Josh has a couple multi-lands. But then you had like a deck with all multi-lands. Or are they called that?
Dual lands.
Dual lands. Okay.
Yeah.
And that was like, oh no, now the game's really broken because Josh can play these 2-color decks,
or
3-color,
5-color.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was sort of like, I don't know what to do about that.
Any deck that you got serious about, it was it was all the dual lands, Birds of Paradise, and you just put any old card in there you wanted.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay.
Yeah, that was
ferocious.
Yeah, we didn't talk about colors, but like most of the decks we've talked about, we start out playing one color. I remember, Greg, when we first started playing, every deck was single color.
Black. Oh, in general.
That existed in the meta, because I didn't have any cards at first, so you would just hand me decks, and it was like the red goblin deck, the green monster deck, the black whatever, I believe you handed me the green deck first. I was like, play that. And we played in a game that was multiplayer. I think the first game I ever played was more than one person, like real game after you sort of taught me. And everyone was just playing monocolor decks. And then we learned later, we can have 2-color decks. And that it kind of stalled at 2 colors for a while. And I, at some point, I think just because I was like, if I could get these 3 cards together, then I could do this cool thing.
I remember you had a green, white, blue deck. It was like Stasis, Sarah Angel, maybe.
Yeah, that might have been one of my first combo decks.
3 was hard to get to.
Yeah. So 3 made it be, as I was testing it, was like, the colors are all screwy. Like I'll have the right cards, but I can't cast them. And everybody had like a dual land or two because you would open some packs to revise. But if you just have one dual land, it doesn't help you that much. You have to have a critical mass of them. So that was my thing. I was like, okay, I'm going to go out and get dual lands, and that'll just open the door to like, if I think of any cards that I want to put in the same deck, I'll be able to do it. And then I've told this story on the show where I would just trade Sarah Angels straight across for dual lands. I just let it be known, and people would come up to me at school and be like, hey, I heard you'll trade a Sarah Angel for a dual land. I'm like, yep. And
I think I did that.
Yeah, you might.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure I did. Sorry.
I was about to say fools.
Dude, I got that Sarah, though.
Yeah.
I had like 2 bad lands and was so proud of them in the Fireball deck.
Yeah.
Black red, I think is what it was, right? And then Josh has like 50.
Yeah, I think I had over 100 at some point.
It was obscene.
If you haven't been around for that long, I've told the story in the past, but I lost most of them in a flood at my parents' house.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So the basement flooded at my parents' house. But the top shelf didn't get hit, which held my decks. So that's why I do still have some that were in decks, but all the ones that I just had like in a box
I didn't know
are
this.
gone, turned to dust. Yeah.
Oh, this is
I
terrible.
had a Mox Emerald in there too. It was pretty bad.
That's rough.
Well, they'd been sitting there for years. I never thought about them. But when I got back into Magic, I was like, I got to go back home. I got all these cards. And then only a few of them still existed. But anyway, yeah, I was kind of the first in our play group to start playing like a lot of colors and then that allowed me to start putting really weird stuff together. Like the Stasis deck was one of my early combo. And of course, it's a combo lock thing. And I think I read about it or heard somebody talk about it. But what I would do is get Stasis out, and I would get either a Birds of Paradise or a Ley Druid, I think, and put an Instill Energy on it. Nothing was going to untap, but I could untap that, and then that would give me the blue mana to pay for the Stasis forever. So once I had that, then I just needed something that could attack without tapping. So either a Sarah Angel or a Zephyr Falcon. So I would just lock the game. You're never untapping again, and just I can attack with this for 1 to 4 every turn.
Super you'd fun. Have to wait for a land to come, wait for a land to get a 2/1 nothing, and then
I thought I was so clever.
It was brilliant though. Like it was so clever. It wasn't fun to play against, but it was brilliant.
I remember I had a few unfun decks. Do you guys remember my Ankh of Mishra Armageddon deck?
Oh, yeah. I remember by name. The Ankh. What'd the Ankh do?
The Ankh, every time anybody puts a land in play, it does 2 damage to them.
Oh, yeah.
So I would strip
this is
mine.
What I mean, the universally like hits any type of deck, anyhow. Yeah. Go ahead. Remind me again, because I
would play all Birds of Paradise. Then I would play like a Zurin Orb, and then I would play Balance.
What's Balance do?
Balance
again?
is
wipes all the like down to how many.
Whoever has the least amount of creatures, you go down that many creatures. Whoever has the least amount of lands, you go to that land. So I'd sack all my lands, play Balance, and I have 0 lands, so everybody has to sack all their lands. If I was far enough ahead, I would sack everything, so everybody would have nothing, and the Ankh would be out. And it would be like, well, if you play a land, you're going to die, but if you don't play a land, you're going to die.
Yeah.
That was the early deck that became
like,
the wave deck, because I realized that actually the most powerful thing about that was Black Vices and Howling Mines.
Because everyone's just sitting there drawing, not being able to do anything.
Go back to the woolly mammoth days.
Totally.
So let's talk about the wave deck, because this is like, I think, a funny story, and you've already sort of talked about it. I think it was the best deck in our playgroup at the end, and our playgroup didn't continue long enough after for another deck to eventually, supplant it. So it kind of ended our era. Everybody went to college. We graduated from high school.
That's how I remember it.
And the wave deck, got to
reign
be
supreme
at the end, right? It definitely would have gotten, somebody would have come up with the next thing, but because it was the kind of last of that era.
Because that was the tournament, right?
Yeah, we ran a local tournament in Canby, and I think it was a team tournament. We did single sorcerer, 2-headed giant or something. And
I'm pretty sure it was single sorcerer.
Yeah, and so everybody was in pairs. And what did you play at that tournament, Greg?
Probably discard.
It was
deck.
discard.
The discard?
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
I remember we took 1 game off you guys with our Karma Magical Hack deck, and we ran around like idiots.
I remember that, actually, you guys celebrating.
Because we just sort of knew that we had inferior, we just were behind you guys at that point, and we were like, oh my gosh, we beat the discard deck. Woo!
I didn't ever feel like it was that good. It felt like it was a great idea that wasn't quite.
You guys were
in.
mad because we had Karma, and you were like, well, this is just a...
Because you were a black-based deck,
yeah. It's against me, personally.
Yeah. And then we got our butts kicked by the wave deck.
And the wave had, so I was thinking of it as the Stormbreaker. Is that right? Stormseeker. That was the deck with Stormseeker in it, right? Okay.
So Stormseeker is a card that it's an instant that deals damage to a player based on the amount of cards in their hand. And I would fork a Stormseeker to win a lot of games.
Yeah.
Was one of the ways that it won. And it was the opposite of your discard deck, basically. It said, okay, everybody's going to draw a lot of cards, and I'm going to punish my opponent's drawing of the cards. So Underworld Dreams will punish them, Black Vice will punish them, that kind of stuff. And it'll have a counterspell package backup to protect its key pieces, and that was kind of the whole thing. And the interesting thing is it's called the Wave deck, not because of what it's doing at all, but because I had shuffled the deck so much that the cards did this wavy thing. They weren't like curved like this. They actually literally went like that.
You must have played in the rain once or something, because it was only that was the only deck that looked like that.
I think it was just
wear and tear.
Yeah, I think I just
that
hadn't
much?
shuffled any deck before that amount of times. Like that deck was honed.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, to this day, like the only like dual lands and stuff I've got left from that era were in my box with my decks, which had the Wave deck in it. So most of my dual lands were in that deck. Most of the ones I was playing with anyway. And so they still have the Wave to them. If I pull them out of the sleeve, you can see it. Maybe I'll take a picture of one.
See, yeah.
Yeah, I'll take a picture of one and we'll put it on the video. Yeah, but that was the sort of culmination of all of that. I think of things I've been trying for a while with the Armageddons and the Stasis and everything else, and it didn't end up. The final version didn't have Armageddon or Stasis. I think it still had Strip Mines and some stuff to kind of...
Wrath of God, was that in there?
Yeah, it had Wrath of God because it wasn't very creature heavy.
Reversal of Fortune.
Wheel of Fortune.
Wheel of Fortune.
Wheel of Fortune, yeah.
Yeah, because the other trick was if you got Underworld Dreams out, you would fork a Wheel of Fortune instead of forking the Stormseeker. Yeah, one of the things I
gives me
learned from
ulcers
playing
thinking
all
about that
5
deck.
colors was that you could play all the restricted cards.
Yeah, that's my memory of it. It's like, Demonic Tutor, Regrowth. There were only so many of those floating around in the playgroup, and they're all in that deck. So
Yeah, that's another
was a
realization I
beast.
had. Well, the game designers had basically told you these are broken. These are too powerful because they had to create an additional rule for them. So my thinking was like, okay, well, if I can play as many of those as possible, my deck will just be more powerful because I know those are too powerful because why else would they make this special rule for them?
And you already had so many colors, you could just pick whatever the awesome restricted cards were and throw it in there.
Yeah, just play all of them.
Right,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
So
Channel, did you have Channel? That actually got banned.
Yeah.
Right? In our time, it was banned.
I don't think we were allowed to play Channel anymore. It's too good.
And we only had like a couple.
And I didn't play Mind Twist because I didn't want people discarding things. But yeah. So that was my recollection of our playgroup as well. Those were fun times. I mean, those were what Magic's all about, and still I think is all about when people start it. I wanted to ask you, because Greg, you said you went and bought the fork for $25. There's no way it could have been that much money. Because I remember looking in the case and seeing Black Lotuses that were like $15. But maybe this was
It might have been like
a year or
$8.
two. Yeah,
And
it
my
might have
brain
been.
is like,
Yeah. I was going to ask, like, do you remember like what your most expensive cards were, what they were worth at that time? Because you said you were proud of the 2 Badlands you had.
yeah,
Do you remember how much those were worth?
maybe 10. I mean, they were like $10 cards, which now when I say it out loud is like, oh man.
But when you're $10
It
was a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you had 2 of them. I believe one of them was unlimited too. Just picturing in my head, I think you had an
Black and
unlimited.
white, different
they were
borders?
Well, they were both white bordered, but unlimited has a slightly different look to it.
Okay.
You can tell when they're side by side; they're not the exact same. And that's quite a bit of money these days. A lot more than $10. The unlimited one, especially, it's maybe $1,000 for both of those now.
Wow.
Yeah, something like that.
I didn't really buy cards though. I mean, I might have.
It was mostly
done-
what you cracked in
yeah.
packs. We traded too, right?
A little bit. I was always afraid to trade with you because I knew I'd get the
Well,
worst
I
end
didn't
of the
mean
deal.
I didn't mean you and me. I just meant like
A little bit, yeah, a little bit. I was I think, risk averse, so I would buy packs, but not want to buy individual cards, and was a little bit shy on trading. The Time Elemental I spent money on, even though it's worthless. I mean, it wasn't a very good card, but I kind of wanted it in the deck. The fork, I remember. I think I might have even bought 2 of them.
Ty, do you remember having any, like what your most expensive card was? Or do you remember seeing a card and being, I wish I could get that and know how much it was?
Yeah, I didn't have any good cards, is my recollection. And they all belong to you and Greg. No, I mean, I remember going and buying a couple of clones because I was like chasing after
Do you
the
remember
10
how much
bag.
they were?
Right.
I want to say they were like $10.
Wow.
Or maybe 8.
Maybe 2.
But it hurt, it hurt. And doppelgangers then for that same reason.
Oh, Vesuvian doppelgangers.
Yeah, which were
Yeah.
even better, kind of.
For sure, 'cause you can change 'em.
Right, more expensive. But
Actually, they're worse because they cost more mana. But
yeah. So those come to mind. And then we had to have 4 magical hacks. So we had to go buy those. I think those were cheaper. I want to say that was like $4 or something, but still
Each
it was
or
like each. Yeah. But it's like, it's an instant and it does so little. It kind of hurt to like spend money on such a thing that does so little. I don't know.
I might be mixing up in my head too, like, because we played for a few years. So maybe like I'm picturing the Black Lotus for $15 in the case, like the first time I ever went to the LGS. and we're talking about 2-3 years later buying some of these other cards, it's possible.
There
or
were
maybe
a
my
lot of
recollection
cards
is just wrong.
There were also a lot of cards in the case that were like 50 cents, 75 cents. And it was like, oh, do I want to spend 75 cents on that thing? It's not that good, but I kind of want it. Like there were a lot of low tier. And it was when you started seeing $5 for a card, you're like, oh, that's a good one.
Our playgroup had a couple of older, they were a year or two older, but at the time that felt like a lot because, the difference between 14 and 16 is a lot. And them being like, it's not a good idea to buy the expensive cards. And I would be like, why? Michael Jordan's rookie card is worth X amount. Why isn't it worth it to buy a Mox or whatever? And they were like, well, yeah, because it matters that the card for Michael Jordan's rookie card is from the year of his rookie year, but it doesn't matter if the Black Lotus is from the year of Black Lotus's rookie year, right? They just reprint it at any time. And then I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. So I didn't buy any of the expensive ones. Like that was kind of talking me out of buying, I think, a Moxen or something like that.
You got a couple though, right? Didn't you buy
I eventually got a Mox Emerald. That's the only power I've ever had. But I just wanted to say that those guys cost me $200,000 or something.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
They were drivers though. So we needed them.
Yeah. That's true. They had driver's license, so I had to listen to them.
Yeah, I just bought booster packs, which in retrospect was probably I don't know. It was whatever.
It was fun though, right?
No, it was great. It was great. And we had so much fun, but I got a lot of spores. It probably would have been better just investing in some good cards, than trying to, I don't know, collect the whole new set.
There's a dopamine hit though of going through those cards.
Hasn't
anything
changed.
Of Gambit.
For sure. I love it.
It's not till you have 2 large boxes full of basic land where you're like, maybe mistakes were made here.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I think that's people out there when they hear old Magic player, they think what cards did you have in your collection? And back then people didn't have, I had a large collection because I got more into it than anybody, and I was a big trader.
And you worked at a card shop.
And I ended up working at a card shop, and I don't know if I've ever told this story on the show. The way that they paid me was in cards. And what I did for them was I priced all the cards, and I also took all the chaff, all the crappy stuff, and I built it into pre-con decks, and they could sell the pre-con decks. And so I would just take all the elementals, water, earth, air, get the right mana, a pump spell and a counter spell, and that's a 60 card deck that you can play. That's probably better than most people make in their first deck or whatever. Yeah, and the deal was they would pay me, a booster box X amount of time or whatever, and that's how I got a lot of my cards. The problem was when I started doing that, the new set was Fallen Empires, which is historically bad. There's almost no cards from Fallen Empires that still see play, maybe 2.
What are some of the cards?
High Tide.
Okay.
Oh, is this with the... No, not
High Tide's the only one that sort of sees. Yeah, it had Homerids, remember? You had to every upkeep put a counter on unless it would go 1 counter, 2 counters, 3 counters, 2 counters, 1 counter, 2 counters, 3 counters.
I probably have more of those cards than any other cards, which is why all my cards suck.
Yeah, it's famously the set where they finally were able to print them enough that a lot got out there, because up till then it had just sort of always sold out. They were hard to find. And then it was historically bad, underpowered, crappy cards.
Yeah, they were awful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to this day,
probably when I stopped playing Magic.
I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to build this black and red sports deck, and it's just a non-starter, and it just, I don't know. Then I went to college.
Yeah. I think college was still a little bit a ways, but yeah, that was definitely I had a lot of cards because of the card shop thing. But what happened to your guys' cards, I guess, was where I was leading with this question is do you still have them? Are they somewhere?
I have mine, yeah. I left them at my mom's house for many years. And then when my son got to the age where it seemed like he might be interested in them, my mom brought them down, and then they were at our house. So I dug them up the other day and had a look, but I still have them such as they are. I think all of them.
How old's your son?
He's 11.
About ready to get started.
Yeah, he's newly, being with you and engaging with Command Zone. He's definitely Dad, teach me how to play. And so now I actually need to ask you what I need to buy, get him going. Anyway,
we'll get
into
Arena
it.
is the best way to learn, but yeah, you want to get some physical cards.
Definitely. Yeah, no screens.
How about you, Greg? What happened to your cards?
I think they lived at my parents' house when I was in college and med school, and at some point, my brother got back into it. He kept a lot of the decks still put together.
Still in rubber bands?
Still in rubber, yeah. Still in rubber bands. Or the rubber bands
we didn't sleeve anything, and the decks were kept in rubber bands, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know about that.
We didn't know the cards were going to be worth $1,000, yeah.
When I started where I work now at this clinic, one of the physician's kids was into Magic. In fact, I'd met him before. It was like, oh, you work with my mom. And then it was like, oh yeah, my friend Josh is on the command zone or whatever. Somehow it came up and he's like, you know Josh Lee Kwai? And I was like, suddenly he was like, he knew me who knew you. And I was like, okay.
Did you give him the cards?
So I gave him all the cards from the decks, but I didn't have all my reserve cards. I don't know where those went to. I just like had the box of decks.
So there's some that are like missing?
Yeah, and then he played with it for years, and they got all mixed up. And so I looked at it, and I know things are in pieces. So, and then I gave them back to my brother, and I think he has them now. So
we've referred to it, but we eventually all of us stopped playing. I came back eventually, but was it just life happened? We dispersed. People went to college, or do you remember why you stopped playing?
It was also the friend group, not the player group that we had, not being there. And going to college and having different friend groups that had different interests, and it wasn't where I wasn't Magic. And I didn't go out and find those folks either. Like it was probably just a transition time for me in that way.
I remember us driving up because you went to University of Portland.
Yeah, we both did.
Yeah, and Ty and I and another of our friends, Jeff, we would drive up. We did this only a couple times, but drove up and to play Magic and hang out. Maybe a couple times early on when you were a freshman. Yeah.
That was probably the last. That was probably the last few games I played. Until years later.
I did play again. I forgot about this in med school. So I must have gotten a hold of my cards because I had a friend that played the Star Wars CCG that I was telling you about, and then he had not played Magic, and so I taught him Magic. He taught me Star Wars CCG.
So you got back and played for a little bit.
So we did, yeah. We still lean more towards the Star Wars cards because it was his interest too. So. But no, I did have some cards in med school. I forgot about that.
You had time in med school to play Magic, huh?
Yeah, oh yeah.
From what I hear, that's a rarity. Okay,
that's concerning.
Before we move on, I forgot we didn't talk about blind Magic. So we would make up formats. Most of them were not very good, but this is one that stood out because it was
this one's also not very good.
It was a cockamamie scheme. Yeah. Do you remember how it worked?
Okay, so my recollection is playing in your basement.
Yep.
And nobody can look at anybody else's cards.
In fact,
so we were
hiding opposite sides of the room, right?
Behind the couch, somebody's over upstairs maybe, or in the stairwell, and you would just have to shout like, okay, I'm tapping 2 and I'm attacking Josh. Okay.
This is like Calvin Ball for Magic.
Yeah, it was
just make up the rules.
Yeah, and we would play for hours, and it would be like, okay, I'm gonna block. All right, what is your thing? And you give the numbers, and then ultimately you was like, oh, okay, he's got a Singular over there. All right, okay, now I know that. But then you'd forget somehow.
I don't know how we came up
with okay, I'm attacking you. Oh no, what is
No, don't attack him. He has to say, you remember, oh crap.
Oh yeah, okay, I eat that. Now it's 5/5.
Wow, I never played that. That was
later. Yeah, we did that quite a bit, as I recall.
We were just always trying to figure out new ways to play it.
Well, it was like the 80th day in a row that we played.
Yeah, how can we make this different?
Yeah.
Okay, I want to move on to some questions here. Just because I think people out there will find it interesting from your guys' OG perspective. Do you know what a 2-for-1 is?
A 2-for-1?
No.
We're not going to hazard.
What do you
a guess?
think a 2-for-1 might be in Magic
directly?
Oh, okay.
What's your confidence level?
No, 0
I'm
to
very
5.
confident it's a
2-for-1. Boy, killing 2 creatures at once. I don't know. I got nothing.
A trade, like a 2-for-1 trade.
It's any time you use a card and you get 2 cards worth of value at it. So if one card killed 2 creatures, that's a 2-for-1. Or one card drew you 2 cards, that's a 2-for-1. I use 1 resource and I get 2 resources worth of stuff, either taken away from my opponents or given to me.
Value added type of card.
Yeah. Do you know what mana ramp is?
I imagine something that's more like kind of exponential, where 1 gets 2, 2 gets 4, something like that. But I don't know what that would be.
The rate at which the game is getting more mana? Something like that?
Per round, like by round 2, you're actually at
like what would be like a mana ramp card, do you think?
Soul Ring?
The Lauernauer Elves.
Llanowar Elves? Yep, both are. Yeah, it's anything that gets you ahead on mana above what you would have if you just played 1 land per turn.
Okay.
So if you have access to 4 mana on turn 3, you've ramped by 1.
Okay.
Do you remember what these cards do? Power Sync.
That's a counterspell.
Yep.
But it makes you like if I cast it for 4, you have to tap 4 more mana, right? In order to, it takes all your mana if you can't pay
Greg,
the cost.
you're shaking your head no.
No.
Spell Blast is the cost of the spell.
Right.
Mana Sink is if they
They have it,
4
whatever they have
Power
left.
Sink.
Yeah, a Power Sink is you have to, if they have no land left, tap 1 more.
Right, exactly.
or
They have to
whatever.
pay extra whatever you pay.
Yeah.
Right. It's blue and X.
Right.
And the spell's countered unless they pay X more mana. So
Lovely card.
if you pay 4 mana, they have to pay 3 more mana or their spell gets countered.
Yeah, it's nasty,
So
as
you
I
do it
recall.
when, they only have 1 left and you know they
Or
can't
you're
pay
up
it.
on them,
All right.
yeah.
Do you remember what Curd Apes are?
A red-green
If
ape,
a
right?
forest is available, then they're like 2/3. But if it's not, they're 1/1. Is a red card.
Pretty good.
Boom.
What was the mana cost?
Was it red-green or
One
just
red?
red?
1 red.
Oh, okay.
1 red for a 1/1.
Two,
If
three,
you
or
have a
four.
forest,
Yeah.
it gets +1/+2.
Right. Yeah. So if you bust out with the dual red green, then it's 2/3 immediately.
Yep.
You must have had some apes.
I must have.
You mentioned this one, so I'm assuming what you know what it does, but the Hive. Do you remember what the Hive does? I remember this was a favorite
Toby,
in early.
our friend Toby.
Yeah, Toby loved it, but it was a favorite in our early group when the games were slower.
It's green, and I think it had an upkeep, and it spit out 1/1 flyers each turn.
Do you remember the card?
No.
You're close. It was an artifact, so it wasn't green.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it costs 5 mana, and then you pay 5 and tap it, and you make a 1/1 flyer.
You know what? I think it was in a mono green deck, and it was like all the creatures.
You
and
associate
Hive
with
was-
green because
Yeah,
in
that's
Toby's
right.
deck it was green.
That's right. Yeah.
So you
green
didn't have
deck.
an upkeep. You just paid for whenever you wanted to crank out a flyer.
Yeah, but you can only do it once per turn. It's a pretty bad card. It's 10 mana for a 1/1 flyer, and then 15 mana for a second, or maybe
Yeah.
5 more mana for each subsequent one. But every once in a while, it would go off.
It was
in long
really
games.
good. I remember it was really good in like the 4-player games, and he would just sit there, and we wouldn't worry about it too much because we're like, whatever, 1/1 greens. And then all of a sudden, he would have like 30 creatures. It would be a problem.
And they all have flying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Wheel of Fortune. Do you remember what that does?
I know that one.
That I did. Is this where everyone discards their hand and redraws an entire?
Yeah.
Maybe was it 7 or was
It's
it the
7,
number
I
of
think.
cards you had? Okay, 7 cards.
I think it's 7.
Do you remember the casting cost of it?
2 in a red.
Yep. 3 mana total. Pretty good.
I remember that as one of your favorites. And just any time the game is not to your liking, just be like, you know what?
Let's just
Wheel of Fortune this.
A couple other questions here. So, Commander, most popular format. Of the top most popular cards in the format, there's a website that tracks all this stuff called EDH Rec. 3 of the top 10 cards are from Revised, from Unlimited, from Alpha, from the original group of cards. Can you name those 3 cards?
3 of the 10.
To this day,
current
right?
top
3 of the
10
top 10 are from our era, from Revised. You could have pulled them.
Got to be Soul Ring,
Soul Ring,
right?
Soul Ring
Yeah.
has to be one of them.
Soul Ring is the number 1 most popular card in the format. There's 2 left in the top 10.
Regrowth, maybe? Demonic Tutor? Counterspell?
I mean, as simple and basic as Counterspell is, but that seems to.
Of the game nights I've seen, I can't recall a single 2 blue Counterspell
none of them
being
are-
played.
Not counting restricted cards, or could it be restricted?
Could be restricted.
Demonic Tutor is a good guess.
Yeah. Demonic Tutor.
Nope.
Okay. No, we don't guess that then.
Okay.
We didn't.
Confidence
retract that
level
guess.
0.
Yeah. Okay. 2 more.
Soul Ring was 5, and the rest
Yeah.
here we're
Okay.
guessing.
Would they be artifacts?
The Dancing Scimitar? No, I'm just kidding.
Dancing Scimitar, one of Greg's favorite cards early on.
I love the art.
Brass Man. No. Gotta be like fast mana, right? Like one of these, like Jewel.
I mean,
Bows
I
or
would have said
something, or
like Dark Ritual
they
was
just-
awesome.
yeah.
But those are.
No, that's just black though. Birds of Paradise, maybe.
Oh, well, was that unlimited?
Yep.
Birds of Paradise.
Close. It is in the top, like, 100, but it's not in the top 10.
What is
You
it?
said one of them already.
Dark Ritual?
That's in the top 100 as well, but nope.
The Brass Man.
You've said a lot of cards that are actually Demonic Tutor is in the top 100. You're dancing around a lot of the cards that still get played. So you recognize that which ones are the sort of powerful long term, which is good. Counterspell
Oh, okay.
There was.
is it's in the top 10, and then the other one hasn't been mentioned this whole time, and I think we actually kind of slept on it back in the day. We didn't realize how good it was. Swords to Plowshares.
Oh, yeah. We didn't use it a lot. But that makes sense. That
What's
was
it do again? It gives you life?
1 white for.
It's 1 white to exile a creature, and then the creature's controller gets life equal to its power.
See, because it's white that takes out a creature quickly and easily. right?
Yeah, just 1 mana,
Yeah.
take out any creature, and it also exiles it. Well, in our day, it was said remove from the game, but it meant no regeneration. You can't reanimate it from the graveyard, anything like that. I think, and this is very common even to this day, new players tend to overestimate how good life gain is. They tend to want to play decks that gain them life, and life gain is, it's not that it's always bad, but it's not good unless your whole deck's about it.
Right.
And then you would overestimate how bad that is that you're giving your opponent life. So a lot of people looked at the card and be like, well, I don't want to give my opponent's life. But really removing the creature for very cheap and efficiently is a lot better than them gaining even 6, 7, 8, 10 life. Other cards that were kind of from our era that are still in the top 100 most popular cards, Brainstorm. Brainstorm's one of the most powerful cards of all time, as it turns
That's
out.
just draw X, right?
No, it's draw. That's Brain Geyser.
Brainstorm
Brainstorm is draw 3 and then put 2 cards from your hand back on top of your library.
Oh.
And it is a very linchpin card.
I think we slept on that one too, because I remember that card, but we didn't run it much.
One of the reasons it's powerful is as a thing that we didn't really have available to us yet at that era, which are things that shuffle your deck. So what you can do is draw 3, put 2 cards back that you don't want, and then use an effect that will shuffle your library so that you kind of get
Optimizing your hand.
You're not going to have to draw those 2 cards that you just put back. And there's things called fetch lands that didn't really exist in our day that are prevalent enough now that you can sort of reliably be able to shuffle, and that makes Brainstorm a lot better. Land War Elves we had talked about is in the top 100 still.
They are the simple casting cost, low cast, simple cards that you're talking about.
It's always going to be
They're
good.
not-
It's a 1 mana thing that gets you ahead on mana. And you're
Right.
Or the Will of the Wisps.
Will-O-Wisp not good anymore, but yeah, sorry.
Well, not yet.
Yeah.
Wait for the counter strike that we're going to come up with.
Felwar Stone, I don't even know if you remember that card, but that's a very highly
I
played card.
remember it, but I don't remember what it
A
does.
floating cube thing with it looked like brain and multicolored.
Yeah, and it just
3
taps
colorless?
2 colorless and taps for any color of mana that your opponent can one of their lands can produce.
Ooh, that's good.
But it's basically a Birds of Paradise kind of thought thing. Mystic Remora. Do you remember this card at all?
No,
I don't think we played this card at all.
I don't
Is it
remember
like
that.
a fish, like a remora?
Yeah.
Is it Mystic?
Is it blue?
It's blue.
Is it a card?
What it does, it
Confidence
has a
level
cumulative upkeep. So it's from Ice Age. Do you remember cumulative upkeep cards?
Yeah.
Yeah. And what it says is whenever your opponent casts a non-creature spell, you draw a card unless they pay 4 additional mana. So
Card draw.
Yeah, it's card draw that's repeatable. And it's actually a lot better when you think about a 4-player game because you have 3 opponents and a lot more chances for them to cast a non-creature spell before it gets back to your upkeep and you have to pay that cumulative upkeep cost. Because it's
Right.
1, then 2, then 3, then 4, and becomes untenable.
So you're hoping
pretty
to
quick.
just get some hits out of it.
Yeah, because
Did any of us have that card? I don't remember.
Yeah,
I don't remember.
we did,
seeing
but
that
we
one.
didn't look at it twice.
Okay.
Because it was,
Cumulative upkeep. We're just
and we didn't know it was good, and maybe it wasn't good because if your opponents are casting a lot of creatures, it becomes worse because it only triggers on non-creatures.
Yeah.
and we were casting a
I
lot
don't
of
think
creatures.
we thought enough about efficiency back then either. It's 1 blue mana for this thing, and
right.
so if you can draw even 2 cards for 1 blue mana, it's very good. And if you draw 3 or 4, it's insane. But I don't think we thought about things in those terms, and I don't think we ever really got to that level of thinking about the game.
We got close though.
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely remember, building the Tim deck and thinking like, oh, it needs to be faster and how can I get it faster? And, I mean, but maybe not to the level of like, this is 1 mana. Look at all I get for 1 mana.
Yeah, I think we did think about speed and being efficient and doing things early in the game because we learned after a while that you couldn't be slow. You would just get run over. You wouldn't be able to catch up. But I don't think we thought about like, okay, for my 2 mana, I get this much resource
Right.
back. So that ratio, I want to be X, Y, or Z.
I think you're right. I don't think we were quite making that calculation.
Yeah. Mana Drain. Do you remember Mana Drain? This was in our era. It's from Legends.
I'm picturing Surge, the guy.
I just am
mana-
thinking
that's
of
Power
mana
Surge.
short.
Power Surge. What's Mana Drain?
Mana Short had the rose on it and made it so your opponents had to tap all their mana and it pulled all the mana out of their mana
Mana
pool.
drain. I don't remember.
Yeah, it was a counter spell. I'm not sure if anybody had this in our playgroup. I don't remember us playing with it either. I think we would have if anybody had it. I think it's from Legends. You counter their spell, and then on your turn, you get colorless mana equal to the mana value of the spell you countered.
Oh,
You remember
no.
the art?
We did not have that.
You remember what the art looked like?
It's like a 2 little blue curly things I can picture in my head. They've changed the art since, so the
Okay.
original art is, yeah.
I don't know.
That's
I
the
don't
other
remember that
card
one.
from our era that was in the top 100. There's a story I wanted to tell. I don't know if you remember this, but a thing I used to do was when I was sort of testing a deck,
Yes.
I would Sharpie the
Oh,
name
yeah.
of the cards on, or like I was like, oh, I don't want to trade for all this stuff if I don't think the deck's going to be very good. So I would just Sharpie, and it's called proxying, and people still kind of do that now. And so I would just write on, I remember I didn't have enough Birds of Paradise, and I was building, I think there was the Ankh deck, and I wanted to test it. So I just wrote Birds of Paradise in Sharpie on 4 cards, and I would test with that. You remember me doing this, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I went back and I was looking at the old cards recently because of this episode, just trying to, and I realized that I still had the Sharpie cards.
Yeah, I have some too.
Oh, I want to see yours.
I have a couple. Yeah, I have one that has Meekstone written on it. I think it's a swamp. It says Meekstone.
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember what the cards are that you wrote on?
They were all swamps, I think.
Oh, you were smart.
Yeah.
I did some of mine on Lion's Eye Diamonds, which are like $300, $400 cards now. It's the card
Why
where,
would you
do you
do that,
remember what
Josh?
Lion's Eye Diamond even is?
Was it a white lion?
It is a 0 mana artifact that you can sacrifice for 3 mana of any color, but you have to discard your hand.
Huh. And you were...
Why would you do that?
That card's bad.
But it's
why is it
valuable now because it's bad?
No, it's valuable now because it's extremely broken to get 3 mana for 0 mana.
If you have nothing
And
in
you
your
can figure out
hands.
a way to get around the
Sure,
you
yeah.
discard your
It's already
hand
just-
thing. Yeah. But at the time, it was
Right.
very, very bad.
I
Yeah.
can't picture that one either.
It has like a lady on it, I think, and it's like I don't know.
Well done.
Yep. Yeah, smart.
How many of those did you do?
I mean, because they were pretty common, and I think they were from Mirage or something. But like, yeah, yeah. Regrets.
Why
right?
not a land? Why not a
Regrets.
basic land?
Regrets. All right, so I'm going to hand you guys this to look at, and I want you this first grouping of cards here. I'm going to show you Kenrith, Atraxa, Golos, and Krenko, and I want you to try and figure out which one of these 4 is banned in Commander.
All right, when Golos enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a land card and put that card into the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. That seems pretty good to me because you can make him enter the battlefield like a million times doing different stuff. So you can do that like a bunch. And then he has this extra thing that's good, but he's really expensive. So I don't know. Let's proliferate.
Any type of counter on a permanent or player, you can add another one of those counters
Oh, okay.
to any number. So if there's 10 things with +1/+1 counters, you can give them all one. Or if somebody's got a poison counter, you can give them one.
Oh, that was proliferate. You were explaining when I wasn't listening. Okay,
Proliferate added a counter
Add
to anything that
counters.
has a counter, including players.
that could potentially
To
be
as many things,
That could
yeah.
potentially be manipulated.
It's true, but
I don't know what that combo would
it
be.
only
but-
does it at the beginning of your end step. That's only once per turn. It's hard to spam that a bunch of times.
Oh, I see.
But if
Right,
you have a
true.
million counters, maybe you don't have to.
But there's something that's really difficult.
This one strikes me as not that big
Next
of a
one,
deal. It's just creatures. I don't know.
That becomes exponential.
It's true.
Am I reading that right?
Yeah,
Create X,
yeah.
one,
Because
one.
you get 3, and then you're gonna get
That's like folding pieces of paper.
yeah, and you just have to tap it.
You just
Holy crap, that's pretty good. But again,
well, no. How many times could you untap him or untap him and play him and
right?
tap?
Oh yeah,
if
you could
get-
just
if you
tap
get
him.
4,
Oh yeah,
it's
yeah.
him. It's the goblin. That's broken.
You think so?
I think so. The math of that starts folding quickly. You have 4 goblins out. You make 8. You make 16.
Right.
You make 32.
Yeah.
In 3
Yeah,
taps.
yeah. Okay.
But
All right, you talked me into it.
I don't know. No. What? That's my opinion. That's my opinion.
I mean, this one seems like
You don't have to have the same answer. If you have
Yeah,
different answers,
yeah.
that's fine as well.
this one's gold though. You know that means it's
Which
good.
one?
Atraxa.
Atraxa, yeah.
Yeah, she's gold. So and she's
just means she's more
they're
than
all
one color.
legendary.
Okay. Vigilance.
Right.
Death
Dang it.
touch is like the same as the basilisk, right?
Yeah, who cares?
Okay. Life.
Anything she deals
Oh.
damage to dies.
This
I
card
haven't
seems
really
cool, but
read
not
this guy.
No, it doesn't seem
seems
unbannable.
it seems like you can do a lot, but I don't know if you can like break anything with it.
Put target creature card from a graveyard into the battlefield. I'm still going with the mob boss. I think the math of that could get busted pretty quickly.
Krenko?
Yeah.
I'll go with Golos just to be different.
Just so you cover your bases?
Yeah.
Okay. Golos is the banned card.
Yes.
Nice.
Atraxa is actually the most popular commander in the format for many years now. And all of these are like top 10 most popular.
Oh, I feel bad for ragging on some of them. They're all so good. My bad, Atraxa.
Okay, I'm going to show you another grouping of cards. These are all from our era, and I want you to put them in order of what is the most expensive to the least expensive to buy. If you were to go into a game store right now and try and buy them. So the cards are Wheel of Fortune, Soul Ring, Candelabra of Tanos, and Mana Vault.
I feel like Soul Ring is pretty common. So
It was like
thereby driving its price
$2
down.
back in the day. Is it common now?
I don't know, but that's my working bit of intel for that card.
Okay.
Mana Vault strikes me as a candidate here.
We use
Tap
that
to
all
add
the
3
time.
colorless.
I haven't
Yeah.
seen that.
But it's only 1, bring it out. And then you get 3 colorless mana like immediately. Okay. What?
This one, I don't remember playing with this, but the Candelabra of Tawnos, that lets you just switch your lands around. So to a degree, you can.
Right. Okay, but we need to determine the
Money
price.
value?
Yeah. So it's also going to do with like, I don't know, rarity and just market forces.
I bet Wheel of
bet
Fortune
this is
probably expensive too.
I'm going to say these are the 2 most expensive.
Which 2?
Wheel and Candelabra. What do you think?
Yeah, maybe.
I feel like
don't
Soul
know.
Ring is the
If Soul-
cheapest.
I have no idea with Soul Ring how easy it is to get a hold of, but it was so important to have a Soul Ring in every deck you made. So
Even back in the day, that was important.
it's still now. Yeah. Okay.
I'd say 1, 2, 3, 4, like that.
Okay.
Okay.
So 1.
1 Candelabra, 2 Mana Vault, 3 Wheel of Fortune, 4 Soul Ring.
Okay. Candelabra of Tawnos is the most expensive. It's about $800. Wheel of Fortune is the second. It's about $250 at this point. I think I'm looking at revised versions. I believe these are both on the reserve list. They have made a promise not to reprint these cards. So the number of those that exist in the world are the number that are going to exist in the world. Unless they break the promise at some point in the future, which they show no inclination to do. After that is Mana Vault, which is, you can find a revised version for about $90 at the moment. This has recently spiked in price because of some bans that happened that made this, some people think this was a replacement for some of the banned cards. And then Soul Ring, $1.50, maybe $2.
Oh, nice.
So
I'm glad they've kept that.
So we
price
just
down.
switched 2 and 3, but otherwise we
pretty good.
All right.
Pretty good. All right.
Nice job, Tyler.
The next question, I'm going to show you 3 cards. We'll go by one. I've blocked out the mana cost, and I want you to guess. I'm not so worried about the colors. If you want to guess the colors, you can. It might be easier based on the card color, but about how much mana you think each of these would cost. So let's start with Yargle and Multani, which is just a big creature. It doesn't have any abilities. How much mana do you think that... Well, how big is it?
18.6.
An 18.6. So what do you think mana-wise, just total amount of mana that this would cost, that you would pay for an 18.6?
Probably like 7.
I was going to say 7, but it could. But also, if it is different colors, they might, if it's like a green and a red.
It has no other abilities too. There's no.
It's a gold
trample.
card, so
There's
you
like-
do know it's multiple colors.
Right. Yeah. I'm going to say, because like a 6, like a Crawworm to bring back our friend is 6 mana.
It was
That's
6 for a
6/4.
6/4.
So it's got to be like
8.
Yeah.
I would to pay 10 to get out an 18.6 to be blocked and
Just get
easily
someone
killed.
just terror it or something or
Error.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Well, I'll tell you, it's got black in its color, so it can't be tarred.
Okay,
But
well,
yeah.
it can be Swords to
Yes,
Plowshares.
it can. That's why
That would
Swords
be
has been in
gnarly.
tarred.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
eight-
you want us to guess what the casting costs total, like which
Total
colors
cost.
and everything?
Just total cost.
Okay.
If you want to guess colors, you can, but I think that's too hard.
I'd go with 8.
8.
It cost black, green, and 3, so 6 mana total
It is 6.
for an
They
18.
started
brought
at
it
7.
down.
Creatures are a lot bigger now than they used to be in our day, so you pay a lot less per power and toughness than you used to. Maybe not in the low range. It's still about 2 mana for a 2/2, but once you get up to about 4 mana, 5 mana, stuff just tends to be a lot bigger.
There's so many ways to take out a creature with not bringing you any
Right.
extra value than just a giant power,
Right.
which someone can block with anything. Yeah.
All right, look at this next card. Ragavan, Nimble Pilferer. What do you think the mana cost is on this bad boy?
I know these treasure tokens get spicy.
First of all, can you even
I don't know
digest
that-
what it does?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, you should probably.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, okay, let's see. When it deals combat damage to a player, create a treasure token, exile the top card of that player's library. Until end of turn, you may cast that card. Dang.
So I attack you, Greg. I hit you. I make a treasure token, which is just an artifact I can sacrifice at any time for 1 mana of any color. So I get one use mana, and I get the top card of your library that I can cast as if it were mine. But only I have to cast it this turn.
Is dash haste?
Dash is the ability to just give it haste out of your hand, but then at the end of turn it bounces back to your hand.
I bet it's like 2 and a red.
That low?
I feel like it might be pretty low.
You're right. No, when you say it that way. How about 2 red and a colorless?
2 red and a
3.
colorless.
Red, and 1?
Yeah.
It's just a red.
Whoa!
Yeah, that card's broken.
That's pretty good.
It's one of the best 1-drops ever made.
Yeah, that's...
All right, let's do one more. This one is Urza's Saga. Have you seen a Saga card before?
I think in one of the Command Zone shows I watched had one, I think.
When I played on Arena, there was some sagas
You have to
happening.
kind of like go through each step of it.
So the sagas, the way they work is each chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, happens in order. The first one happens when you play the card, and then the next one happens right after your draw step. So it'll be like you play the card, you get the first chapter. Your next turn, the second chapter, the turn after that, the third chapter. It's counters, so if you could proliferate or something like that, you can manipulate it and you can move forward chapters, if you have other synergies that allow you to do it. But in general, they go once per turn, basically.
Is it its
so
own class of
first
card
turn-
too? Not like
It's an
an
enchantment.
artifact. It's an enchantment. Okay.
Okay, so first turn it gives you 1 white. It looks like that's not that much. Then, I guess maybe it's pretty good. Search your library for an artifact card with mana cost 0 or 1 and put it into the butt. Damn, that's pretty good too.
Remember, it keeps all abilities the whole time once it gains it. So it can always tap for a mana.
Right.
Oh,
And then
2 tap it.
after your
creates-
second turn, you can pay 2, tap it, and create a creature that says, hey, my power and toughness is equal to the number of artifacts I control. And it is an artifact, so it's a minimum 1/1. But if you had 5 other artifacts, it'd be a 6/6. And then on your third turn, you sack it, and you go find an artifact that costs 1 or less, like your Soul Ring or something. But you can also still tap it on that third turn before it goes away to make a second construct if you want to. Or you can tap it for mana and float the mana.
it can't be that costly.
I was thinking that because you're not going to pay 5 or 6 mana on the first turn to like get 1 mana. And the rest of the stuff's pretty cool, but it's got to be like 1 or 2.
2, yeah.
Yeah. I'd say 2.
And it's white.
That diamond mana symbol is actually colorless mana. There's some things that specifically want colorless mana where you can't pay colored mana for it.
Oh, interesting.
Well, 2 total.
Yeah. We'll see.
2 mana?
Yeah.
It's a land, actually. It costs no mana.
Okay. That makes sense. That makes sense.
I should have known none of these were actually straightforward about what we.
Well, I was trying to think like,
they
what was
should
this
be.
one? What was that one? Like, it wasn't going to be 3.
Right, I know, right. Why were we picking a number at all? It should be like, yeah.
-5 mana.
All right, we're just going to look at these cards one at a time.
thought
And I
we
want
asked
you
these
to predict whether you think they are banned or are not banned. Banned or unbanned. Or banned or legal. I don't know. We'll work on the name. The first one is the One Ring.
Well, I'm sure inherently it's just limited or restricted.
You don't know the
not
story
banned.
of this card.
Oh, because of the
because there's only one of
because of
them.
the Post Malone. Yeah. So
So you can only have one of these.
so Post Malone's version that he bought is the One of One Ring. Is a special version that did only make one of that. But there are regular versions for the rest of us. So or there's more than one ring out there, yeah.
So you're asking if it's banned, restricted, or anything?
There's no restricted anymore in Commander because in Commander you're only allowed to have one of any card that's not a basic land. So there's no restricted. There's either banned or legal.
Okay.
So do you think the One Ring is banned or legal? Do you understand what it does? I can explain it if not.
When it enters the battlefield, you gain protection from everything until your next turn, if you cast it.
That means you, not your stuff, but
right.
you can't be targeted or dealt damage.
That's cool.
So what you need to be doing is getting it back to your hand and casting it a bunch. And if you do that, then you can probably avoid this burden thing being that big of a deal.
I mean, the second ability is actually very good, though.
Oh, wait, yeah, because then you get to draw cards if you have burdens. I didn't get that far yet. Yeah, that's pretty good too. Okay. I'm going to say it's not banned.
Yeah, it looks really powerful, but I feel like this is more not looking at the card, but Josh psychology. I think this is a fake out. This is not a banned card, though you think it should be.
We'll go with not banned.
It is not banned.
Okay.
A lot of people think it should be, but it's not.
Okay.
Next card is True Name Nemesis.
Okay. True Name Nemesis.
This is hilarious. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
True Name Nemesis.
I think they might have banned it. I don't know if they banned things for this reason, but it seems to me this one is an argument starter. Like you're going to pick a player. That seems like it would just lead to a lot of yelling in the play group. And perhaps for that reason, they just decided it's not worth it.
Yeah, but it doesn't quite feel game breaking. It feels like game.
True.
Well, I mean, it's kind of game breaking, but
It's-
it's fight starting. Right?
Yeah. Well, the other question here is looking at the overall. Some of them have to be banned. We can't just say no for all of them. So is it the most likely to be banned?
Is it one out of these four? Or are there yes or no for either of these?
The ban list has multiple cards on it, so,
Okay, so
I don't think we can.
We're going to go through a few cards, and more than one will be banned. Yes.
I don't know that I would have that be banned.
Yeah,
but
it's probably not. They don't ban
think so.
stuff just for that reason. We'll say not banned on that one.
It is not banned. Okay. It actually broke a different format because they designed it for Commander. And in Commander, it's not that bad because you have to pick one player, and you still have to worry about the other two. It didn't really actually start that many fights. But in 1v1, it actually was way too powerful. So there's certain formats, one called Legacy, where you're allowed to play this card. And, well, if that's your only opponent and they can't touch this thing, the rate for it is actually pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you ever stuck it, you could kind of ride it to victory. All right, the next one is called Primeval Titan.
Awesome, but I don't think that would be banned.
Really expensive. I mean...
Yeah, I don't think that would be banned.
I would say not banned.
This card is actually banned.
Huh.
Really?
The thing that's easy to miss is it gets any land.
Right. So you could go get Ursa's Saga, for example.
For sure.
Yeah.
And like you said with one of the earlier cards, you can blink it. You can make it enter the battlefield a lot.
Right.
And
yeah.
And there's been a lot of very powerful lands printed over time. So the ability to get any lands is very powerful.
Yeah.
This is a card, though, a lot of people think could be unbanned, and maybe at some point it will be. But currently, it's on the ban list. All right, the next one is Platinum Angel.
That seems like it should be banned. It doesn't seem right.
Is there a way around this, like, you don't win or you don't lose, but you're out of life?
You can't lose and your opponents can't win. So basically, they have to get rid of this before the game can end in their favor.
Correct.
Or anyone can.
Right.
Yeah, you can still be dealt damage and be sitting there at 0
-8.
Sure. But then if they remove this, you immediately die.
Yeah. Not banned.
Yeah. Not banned.
It is not banned.
Ooh, that felt like a Trojan horse. Like it seems like the type of thing that should be banned, but it's
right.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that basically it's like, well, can you kill it? Okay. All right. The next one, if you scroll, is Skull Clamp.
Cool.
Oh, that's probably banned. No, wait a minute.
Do you understand how Equip works? Yeah.
You put it out there. Oh, right. So it's going to live on when the creature dies, right?
Correct.
Yeah, that's got to be banned.
Yeah.
Because you could just do that a million billion times.
Yep.
We say it's banned.
It is not banned. This is famously a card that they changed last minute. It originally gave a plus toughness boost, but they gave it a minus toughness boost. And what that means is for 1 mana, if you put it on a 1/1,
right,
it actually does the killing of the creature too, which means for 1 mana, you kind of draw 2 per creature you're willing to sacrifice, and is extremely powerful, but not banned. One of the more powerful cards out there. The next one is also one of the more powerful cards out there, one of the biggest creatures ever created, Emrakul, the Aeon's Torn.
Take an extra turn after this one. Good gravy. That's spicy.
It has Time Walk right on it. Annihilator. It says Annihilator 6. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
What Annihilator is when that attacks, the player that it's attacking has to sacrifice 6 permanents. Whatever the amount of Annihilator is, you have to sacrifice that many things.
Oh.
I still don't think it's banned.
And Josh Trap, it's not banned. If it feels like it should be, but no.
It's banned.
Oh. just too big.
It looked like it should be banned.
Yeah.
The Time Walk part too.
Yeah, it maybe could be unbanned now. It was banned quite a long time ago, and games are faster now, so maybe it's
15 is a lot.
Yeah, but you normally like if your only goal is to get to a lot of mana, you can do it.
Yeah.
Right, and take an extra turn. I mean, that just is brutal.
It means you play it, and you are going to get 1 attack with it.
Right.
Never mind if you could give it haste or something. So
and it can't be countered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, the next one, if you scroll down, is Teferi's Protection.
I feel like that's banned.
Yeah, I know. I was leaning the same way. In phasing out,
means
I don't remember that.
They just go into like a different phase. They just go over here. And then they come back.
They don't technically
what you would
leave, like, if it said enters the battlefield, you wouldn't get an enter the battlefield trigger, but they're not there. So if somebody casts a Wrath of God and you phased out, they wouldn't get hit.
It's like phasing in Dungeons and Dragons or whatever.
Yeah.
So if you did that, phased all your stuff out, and then Wrath of Godded, then that's a pretty good.
But remember, all your stuff is faded out, so it's hard to do that because your lands are phased out.
Oh, right.
It's not impossible. You can float the mana first.
Right. Yeah. I think it's banned.
Yeah, it still feels like there's a lot of room for some brokenness to happen there. I'd say banned too.
It is not banned.
Okay. We're not very good at this game.
We're not.
You started out so strong.
Okay, we're gonna nail the rest of these here.
All right, the next one
We're
is
getting into the rock, paper, scissors losing thing.
Yeah, right.
Trying to outthink and
Totally.
just
Yeah. He's always one step ahead.
it's always one step ahead.
I didn't think that hard about these guys. This was what I was doing this morning. Like, just throwing some cards on there. All right. The next one is Recurring Nightmare.
That's not banned, is it?
That's why it feels like it must be.
No, we're all twisted up. Maybe it's banned.
What
The only
Why
thing
would that be banned?
Well, I was
am I
going to
missing
say,
here?
the
I'm
only
missing
thing is that
something.
you get it back, so it returns to your hand, so you get to keep doing it, which is nasty. But however, you have to sacrifice a creature, you get it back, and then you return a creature from your graveyard to the battlefield, and you keep doing that.
with a casting cost of 3.
Nah, I don't think it's banned. How much can you possibly have in your graveyard? Okay, I don't know. I don't think it's banned.
Josh built a themed deck around the graveyard at one point.
Playing Josh in
I
Magic
would
is my recurring
say-
nightmare. I don't think it's banned.
I would say it is.
Split decision.
Okay, why do you think it's not banned? I'm just going to draw.
That means it's banned.
No, I'm going to ask Craig the same question.
Oh, okay. I guess I don't see how it can kind of exponentially spin out of control at face value. But I'm
Hey,
probably
Craig,
missing
why do you
something.
think it's banned?
Okay, so dropping something big and pulling it out pretty quickly and doing that twice, like that feels pretty easy to drop some big creatures in your graveyard and quickly get them out for not much.
True.
But there's other ways of doing that
I feel
too,
like
so
we've
maybe
made
not.
arguments about the strengths of some pretty strong cards on here, and then they've turned out to not be banned. So I'm moving my needle a
Yeah,
little
that makes sense.
and saying it's not banned. But I don't like Josh's countenance.
You're,
My
you're
countenance.
probably right.
I feel like it's a
Probably
ban.
right.
What's your confidence level?
My
Craig?
confidence
One.
one.
I'm
Yeah,
guessing.
I'll go for 2.
Okay. It is banned.
Oh my goodness.
The thing is, there are a lot of creatures that like create mana when they come in. So there's easy to get into like loops where by bringing a creature back, it creates the mana to just keep recasting this. And
Right. So you can just do it forever.
Cycle a
bring
bunch of
everything back.
creatures.
Or there's
Yeah.
creatures that, every time this dies, it deals 5 damage to everybody and you gain 5 life. We'll just do, if
Right.
you can just keep cycling that thing. And this allows you to get into the
cycling.
cycle of like, this,
So it is the recurring part that makes it like,
yeah. The recurring makes the nightmare, not vice versa.
Right. Okay. All right. Field of the Dead.
The next card is Field of the Dead.
Okay. Anytime that it does this enters the battlefield thing, I know it's kind of a trigger because there's ways to game that where you can just bring it in a million times.
So could you cycle that land once you get above 7? Or what is it you need?
Anytime you play a land,
Any land.
yeah, if it's different than in the other lands you have, then you'll make one.
And if you have some way to like get lands back into your hand and play them again, then you're going to just...
That's hard to do.
Well, and
but
you should
yeah.
know too that a big difference between when we played and now is there's a lot of lands. So
It's easy to fulfill the 7 different names requirement.
it's pretty
Easier.
it's pretty trivial, and you can do snow covered lands as some, and those count as different ones. So if you wanted to build a deck and you have 37 lands and they're all different lands, if it's 2 colors, pretty easy.
It doesn't, I don't know the mechanism, but that feels like there's a hole for brokenness there too. And I don't know what it is, but I think there's something with that dropping land, getting into an infinite loop that'd be it. Can you get into an infinite loop with that?
Ooh, infinite loop, good word usage. He
Is
knows the
that a term?
terminology. Yeah.
Are we going for banned?
You demonstrate a loop, they say, when you demonstrate a combo.
Yeah, which I don't know that we had anything like that when we played, that we ran into that. The cards
there were
not-
probably some infinite loops that existed. I know there
we
was
didn't
because
figure
Basalt Monolith with like Power Artifact or something will do it, but we didn't know about them
Okay.
that I recall.
That feels like it could be an infinite loop trap.
Let's ban it.
Ban it.
Banned.
It is not banned.
Oh, man, we're on a real good streak here.
Well, I've been wanting to ban all these cards at this point. I've realized I've been saying ban.
Put Greg on the committee, everybody.
Okay.
All right,
Sorry.
one more to go. It is Prophet of Krufix.
We gotta nail this one.
And what is Flash?
Instant speed. You can cast anything at instant speed. Any
Prophet
creature.
of Krufix. Does it sound like something they would ban?
Well, so this is only useful in like a multiplayer. I mean, not only. It's more useful in a multiplayer setup. where you are
Right.
trying to protect yourself from
Right.
more.
Yeah, like if you're playing Commander and you're playing 4 people, you get this every other time.
You get it 3 times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and is there something there that is
Casting creature cards, it means it's your turn. You do something. I'm like, nope, I'm going to block that because I cast my creature with flash.
Nice.
And you get to keep untapping. I
It
say,
feels
let's ban it.
brutal,
Let's
but-
ban it. Let's get it out of here.
I just want to clarify. You're not banning the cards. You're just saying whether
right.
they are or not. Yeah.
Oh, we don't have that power?
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I'm not giving you that
I
power.
got to
I don't have
relook
that
at
power
the
to give.
contracts and stuff.
I'm gonna let this one go, but maybe I should be.
I keep being wrong, so I'm going to go with you.
No. Stick to your
okay.
guns. Stick
Okay.
to your guns.
All right.
I got lucky.
You should
I
have
was
split
doing
up
it
on
on
all
a
of
1
them.
out of 5.
Then at
I
least
was
one of you'd be
guessing.
right.
I just want to ban something so bad.
You wanna ban that
No,
one?
I have no desire to ban cards, to be clear.
I say
I don't want to get into any sort of a hornet's
playable.
nest.
Oh, you heard about that.
No, not at all. Okay, what do you think?
Playable.
Okay. All right.
So,
we'll say
legal or
playable.
banned?
We'll say legal.
It's banned.
All right.
We're good at this.
This was
bathroom break.
no surprise to anyone. This was one of my favorite cards of all time until it was banned because it allows you to do anything at any time. Who wouldn't want to do anything at any time?
I think we've learned that Greg and I should not be consulted on what should be banned or not.
It's hard to tell what's banned and what's not, especially. I was just curious to get your perspective from like not having seen cards for years and years. So thanks for playing along, and thanks a ton for coming on the show. It was really fun to talk to you guys about this.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you,
us.
Josh.
Our pleasure. Or
Yeah.
mine anyway. I don't know about you. I don't
My
speak.
pleasure as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I would say like it's been so important to me in my life, and when I think back to all the fond memories I have, like you guys are really prominent in them, and I don't really remember. Like you guys are in like a lot of my earliest memories running around the soccer field and playing the Magic cards and running around with the camera and making movies. Like I wrote my first screenplay with Ty.
That's right.
We moved to LA together, lived together on and off for the first 5 or 6 years here. Greg I made my first little movies with you, and we were running around by the river, making our Indiana Jones movies or whatnot. Made our first feature film. It was 90 minutes long. We worked on it all summer, I think, between sophomore and junior year. So I don't know. It's crazy. I don't think I would be where I am today without you guys. So I just want to say thanks. And hopefully I can pull you back into Magic a little bit.
Yeah, I think so.
This is
the
the
hooks
first step.
are in.
Yeah.
The first step in getting them back in.
Yeah.
I'm tricking them like I did at the Magic, like I did in the multiplayer games.
Let's go play a couple.
Well, I can definitely say I would not be in this city or where I'm at without you and your influence in my life. And I think that, Magic in particular just taught me how to think about games or other games, or just how to go about like, strategizing or socializing the game. And it was really important, really formative.
A lot of what I recall from what I've gained from our friendship was partly around Magic, but all the other things we were doing that you helped me learn how to argue and defend my point of view. And because it was not animosity, it was friendship, but we were like, no, this, here's why. So like really navigating that was something that, for better or worse, I took with me.
I think for better. Yeah, we were talking about this at dinner the other night. The social aspect of Magic, and we did some other things that were sort of around that, but allowed for a lot of social experimentation when we were in our teenage years that I thought was really important to me in my later life, just formatively about, being able to sort of test the waters socially in different ways. And then games, game theory does inform, like governments use game theory to make decisions, things like that. Mm-hmm. And so, Magic really has that aspect of like, if your brain can sort of make that translation, sort of helping you navigate, other parallel things that you encounter in life later on, even not consciously and things like that. So I think, gaming in general and Magic in particular has been such a formative part of my life because of that. So,
and discovering it together too, like kind of discovering it and figuring it out it was again a different time period without the media that we can have access to now, but it was a group project,
Well, it gives you a language and a way to relate to someone else's intellect in a way that like Monopoly could never do.
Right.
And, for us, I think it was just a way to communicate and to like get to know how someone thinks and really get in there and like, the nuts and bolts of their philosophy. And you start to sort of see the patterns of what type of player they are, what type of person they are. And it just gave us that platform.
Yeah. So I think, that's one of the great things about it. It still does that to that day. I hope they're, I like the idea that there's kids out there maybe listening to this now that are in the same position we were in back in 93 or 94 and going through the same things. And who knows, maybe someday you'll have a podcast and you get to sit back with your old friends who can barely see things in the front of their face anymore and talk about the good old days. May we all be so lucky. Before we go, I just want to talk about our sponsors one more time. CardKingdom.com/command is the best place to go to get your Magic product singles, anything at all. If you want to catch up on Duskmourn or maybe get ahead on Foundations or something like that, Card Kingdom has the huge inventory. They're going to have the cards you want in the conditions you want, in the versions you want. And the great thing is they have super fast shipping. You add all that stuff to the cart, you get it all in one convenient package all at once. It's almost time for the holidays. If you're looking for some gifts for some new friends or old friends, maybe I'll get you guys some Magic cards.
We do like gifts.
Yeah. A great way to get people back into Magic that maybe been out for a while is get them some Magic cards for Christmas or something like that. So if you go to cardkingdom.com/command, that's the best place to go get all that stuff. And then, of course, once you get it, you want to keep it protected. You want to stay in pristine condition. You don't want to Sharpie on your Lion's Eye Diamonds or anything like that. So ULTRAPRO makes the game accessories that we trust our own collections to here at the Command Zone. If you go to ultrapro.com/command, you can find all kinds of cool deals. That's one of the things I love about their website. Actually, their newsletter is really, really great because they'll email you about deals that they've got. But you can often find huge discounts on stuff. And also they have the Mana 8 product line, which is really, really beautiful. If you want people to be wow when they see your battlefield, ULTRAPRO is the way to go. Again, ultrapro.com/command. All right, guys, I wanted to say thanks one more time for being on the show. Hopefully we can do this again, not wait 25 years for the next one.
Well, we have to forget everything that we just talked about. And
learn to play again.
Forget again.
Stop playing.
And then we'll be back.
I think we should sit down in these chairs when we're in our 70s and you haven't played still since the 90s and just see what we remember even at that point. I think I'm impressed. You still remember casting costs of cards and things. So I think you'll still remember it in 20 years or so.
A lot of the art is a trigger for me too. As we were talking, I was what does that one look like again? I need the art.
Yeah, you can picture it in your head.
Next time you can read us the quotes from the bottom of the cards and see if we can get those.
Definitely memorize those.
I couldn't even do that. People read flavor text. I'm I have no idea. I don't know what that is. All right. Big thanks to our whole team here at the Command Zone. Let's see if I can remember everybody here. That is, let's go in order by room. Sam Waldo, Evan Limburger, Jake Boss, Manson Lung, Sebastian Salazar, Josh Murphy, Rachel Kendra, Karina Cruz, Rachel Weeks. I'm just going around the building. Eric Lem, usually I've written this down. Jordan Pridgeon, Jamie Block, Gaurav Galati, Eric Lem, Chris Matista, and Jimmy Wong, of course, the ineffable. All right, thanks everybody for watching, and we will see you next time.
Thank you for your attention. For further inquiries, send an email to commandcast@rocketjump.com or ask us on Twitter @JFWong and @Josh Lee Kwai. See you later, alligator.
Greetings, humans.